Everybody, welcome to the CCWD regular board meeting of July 12th, 1 p.m. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Becca, can you take roll?
Director Underhill,
Yes.
Director Davidson,
Here.
Director Thomas,
I'm here.
Director Cicada,
I'm here also.
President Ratterman.
Here. Item 2 on our agenda is public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. Again, the rate study is going to be the agendized item today. So if there is any public comment on that, we'll take it when that agenda comes up, or when that item comes up on our agenda. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do you have any public comment today? Online?
I just have a comment. Former Director Dean, you must have something to say.
Oh, he will.
Don't you have something to say under public comment?
There.
Welcome back.
Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to item 3, our consent agenda. We have items 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D, and 3E. 3E has been changed. Minor change has been made. They've taken out one subsection.
I'll move for acceptance of the consent agenda.
Second.
Here we got a motion and a second. Becca, you take roll, please.
Director Underhill,
Yes.
Director Davidson,
Yes.
Director Thomas.
Yes.
Director Cicada.
Yes.
President Ratterman.
Yes. Okay, item 4A is new business discussion action regarding proposed water and wastewater rates and settings, Proposition 218 public hearing. Jeffrey Meyer is going to take the stand. Good day.
Good day, bear with me here. Oh, seems like I'm trading one appendage for another. Good afternoon, President Ratterman, members of the board. Thank you for having us here to provide this presentation. The item before you today is to discuss the rate study that has been ongoing for several months. Actually, it goes back to October of last year. And looking at the 5-year financial plan, thank you. Looking at our cost of service, looking at ways we can save costs within our programs through the budget process. But most importantly, coming up with a plan over the next 5 years to address not only our operating needs, and as you're very well aware, all the cost increases we've had, not only the inflation factor, but NCPA doubling, actually over 200% increase over the last 3 years.
CPPA.
I'm sorry, CPPA.
Power.
We didn't get a letter about that.
There we go. Increase in our rates over 200%, and that's our largest individual service and supply costs when we're looking at things. We also have to look at funding our capital infrastructure. We are here in perpetuity, this water district, and we've made significant investments over the years on our capital infrastructure, whether it's pipelines, whether it's treatment plants on both the water and sewer side. But those capital items don't last forever. And we've suffered through a lot since I arrived here in 2008. We had the Great Recession, where basically everything just kind of shut down and we were maintaining status quo because of funding restrictions and the economy just took a dive. Then we were able to, back in 2013, to be able to initiate what we at the time called our capital R&R program, renovation and replacement, to start putting funds into our infrastructure. And over these last 10 years, we've made improvements to our infrastructure, but a number of these plants and facilities are quite old and they don't last forever. What this rate study does is looks at ways to make sure we're funding the 5-year CIP that your board had looked at over the next 5 years with a combination of reserves, expansion funds, grant money, and rates. And those rates include the R&R as well as operating revenues. The other thing this rate study does is it puts us into a position so that we are going to have an ongoing funding source for capital programs. We have the R&R component, but what this does is kind of takes it a step further. In the audited financial section, we have what we call depreciation. And we depreciate assets on an annual basis. We can go from 120 million down to 115 million if we don't add any. So that amount of money, say that $5 million, is what we're, at some point, we need to reinvest in our system to maintain our assets, to maintain the system in good working order. It's like maintaining your household. You don't let your roof fail. On occasion, you go ahead and replace it and you update it to maintain the value of the home. We're doing the same thing here by maintaining not only the value of our assets, but also the reliability and functionality of our assets. This particular plan, and Habib will go into a little bit more detail, actually helps to provide funding for that CIP program. And trust me, that CIP program is critical to our ongoing needs moving forward. We can't have failures. And we're hoping that as we get through this process, that in addition to the grant money we're going to go after, the reserves that are still kind of around, the capacity fees that are going to help fund expansion, that these rates will help give us the basis for ongoing investment into our capital program. So as I mentioned, we're looking at it operationally, make sure we can handle the all the inflationary indexes we've been struggling with over the last couple of years, also on the capital program to maintain the infrastructure. And yes, this is very difficult to achieve. I mean, it is a significant increase when you look at it over time. There's no doubt about it, but I've been here long enough to know that in addition to investing in the people who run it, you really do need to make sure your equipment, whether it's trucks, your plants are working properly, and they don't fail at the least opportune time. We can't afford to run to failure. If we run a system to fail, then it gets more expensive to replace it at that particular point in time. You don't have the benefit of planning your replacement. You don't have the benefit of going out and getting bids. You're in emergency situations. So a lot of what we're trying to do is plan for the future, do it economically, as economically as possible, but also understand that, and Damon can go into this a little bit more detail than I can, and Charles and so forth. The cost of our capital improvement projects has gone up significantly based on circumstances outside our control. Equipment costs, supply costs, delays on getting items into us. All these things are kind of factoring in to make it even more expensive and difficult to maintain our system. We've worked with engineering, we've worked with operations to minimize the impact as much as possible. We've stressed about it. I can tell you Habib and his group is probably tired of us coming back and redoing these studies and giving them new numbers because we keep trying to drive the costs down. And that's going to be reflected in this study. So at this particular point, I'll stop talking because you guys are probably tired of listening to me. So at this point, I will go ahead and bring Habib Isaac up to present to you the rate study, the proposed rates. At the end of this, our hope is that your board gives us direction to proceed with the Prop 218 noticing. If so, they will be mailed out on the 24th, and the Prop 218 public hearing is tentatively scheduled for September 13th.
Can I ask one question before we get started? for this discussion we're having, did we do any kind of advertisements other than our normally public noticed agendas to let people know we're starting to really look at this rate study? Please come by and watch us.
We did put it, we did some outreach on social media. We put a press release out, and then I've just done a bunch of individual invitations and reached out to people that I thought might be interested in as well. So we've tried to, branch this out wider than we normally.
Where did
do.
you post it, in the paper or whatever? it
I
is?
think we actually didn't get a press release out until yesterday. We were hoping that.
I saw it on Twitter yesterday.
Yeah, and Pine Tree and Motherload would pick it up, but that's my fault. I should have got it out. sooner.
Just yesterday would have been kind of a short
Yeah,
notice.
Short notice.
Well, see, I've been kind of really pushing to
Yeah.
But we
get
did
out
push
there
it
and
out
do
more
it.
than we just for a normal.
Because I want the public participating in this point, not just when we're ready to take a vote. You know.
Yeah. And I do believe, I'm sorry for interrupting, is you sent out that public notice and all that outreach last Fridays. We started last week with this.
We did on like social media and stuff like
Yes.
that. I didn't get a press release out. That's on me.
Yeah, and I would like to see maybe in that, whatever that committee is, external affairs, whatever it is.
External affairs.
Yeah, we find another way other than social media.
Yeah.
Especially in our area, because internet is internet here. But I mean, even if something as simple as posting on a bulletin board at Treats or Mountain Ranch or something.
Yeah,
Okay, that was it.
sounds good.
Okay, and Jeff, you mentioned that one of the next thresholds is in September, but we do have some public outreach town hall meetings and stuff scheduled. Those will take place in August. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But, this is already, let's think about it. This is July the 12th. August is 2 weeks away. So there should have been something.
Was there an external affairs meeting in June or
I
in
think the
June?
next one I think is scheduled for next week. There wasn't, but we do have a lot of public outreach planned.
Well, the two people talking about this sit on that committee and have a lot of
Right.
input towards that. And if they want to be done earlier, that meeting, I don't know what happened with the meeting in June, but that would have been a good time to make plans for July and August.
I
But
think-
in next week would be a good time to take this up and give direction. to
Yeah, but
staff.
we're going to be voting. And so that's,
And do you have some kind of a major event outreach program for each district?
Yeah,
Where
so
they at?
the plan right now is that we're targeting that week of August 14, 15, 16, I think it is.
Oh, it's the 17th through 19th.
no, that was
The
wrong.
week before
That's
that. Yeah,
wrong.
We had to correct that.
Okay,
Yeah,
staff report.
those dates are wrong.
And so it's that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of that week where we'll have community meetings in different communities throughout the county. But we're also, it's not limited to that. We're going to do other meetings to make sure we hit, every corner of the county. A lot of group, individual outreach with community leaders and smaller groups. It's going to be a lot more than just those larger community meetings.
Those are the Prop 218, what we're calling Prop 218 Roadshow.
They're not required by Prop
No,
218.
no.
Those are in
I'm just
addition
asking-
to the minimum requirement.
The invites that were sent out were called Prop 218
Oh, is that on
Roadshow.
the calendar invite? Yeah,
Yeah, and on 14, 15, 16.
that's our,
14, yes.
And we haven't decided where those meetings are going to be yet, from what I understand.
we're still working on the details, but we'll get the information out. Yeah, here in the near future.
And so, we're doing these outreaches in August and we're gonna vote and have the public hearing and vote September 13th is the game plan.
That's the plan.
So they
Yes.
have a few weeks to. Yeah,
Right. And the reason for choosing the middle of August for these outreach programs is we wanted to make sure everybody had the opportunity to review the notices that we're going to be mailing out on July 24th. And those Prop 218 notices will go through and identify not only the reasons why we're doing this, but also the proposed rates so that they can see them. We want to make sure they have plenty of time to ask questions, to understand it before we go out there and talk to them.
well,
We'll see.
I remember having this conversation months ago. And if I could be a voice on that committee, because right now I just call in, I can't participate. I would have been screaming for, almost every other week, there's got to be something, and I don't care, well, whoever just to go out and start saying, you guys, we're doing this rate study, participate, and they should have participated in our budget, you know, with what we had to go through and this, it just, I think next time we go through this, I mean, the public participation request should start 3 months before even we get here.
Well, and we have
Yeah.
been doing a lot of that. We've been
Okay.
talking to community groups.
Well,
We've been-
you know,
We've been
we-
trying to raise this. At every board meeting we've had, at every finance committee we've had, but then outside of that too, with our individual meetings
Yeah.
with community groups, we've raised it at every single EPOC meeting in the last few months. At, other small meetings of community groups. We've been telling people this process is underway. Our costs have gone up, rates are gonna
So
increase.
at these events that you did, outreaches, what were some of the questions that people said or the statements that the ratepayers said, I wonder?
Not a lot of specific feedback, and I think it's hard to just point, it's hard for people because until today, we haven't had the actual rate design to talk about the specifics. We've been saying,
Right.
we haven't been shy about letting people know we have a significant revenue shortfall. We've been talking about the 5-year financial plan that we've presented to the board multiple times in public. But we haven't had the rate design until Friday, till this week, and that.
We're not too late on this to get, if you guys would follow through with your meeting next week on the External Relations Committee, get feedback from your board members and give recommendations. And then the next meeting we have in July, the board is the 4th Wednesday of the month. I'd like to see some recommendations from the External Relations Committee and staff as to how we're going to put together this outreach.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
and-
yeah, and let's step back for a minute, because right now, in item number, what is it? 4A, we're going to vote on whether or not we're going to.
We
do
can't go
that.
backwards in time though. So yeah.
We're voting on starting the 218 process.
Right, but one of
We're
my,
voting on rates today.
No, but I understand.
I was trying to get more public participation
Uh-huh.
before we get to this point. You know what I mean? Give us your ideas. What are you thinking? We know we don't have enough money. We have all these expenses. What are your suggestions, folks? That's what I was hoping to get before we got here. You know, so they're part of the solutions instead of, oh, we have this terrible problem. And now they're gonna see that we came up with one and they're not gonna like it. And I get it. I wouldn't like it either. I don't like it, but. Okay. I'm good.
I've been a member of this board for going on 6 years or more now. And I've been an observer of this board for, God, I don't know, 20 years or so. And public involvement just never has been a significant achievement here. I mean, it makes some pretty important decisions. Am I right about that, Jeff? I mean, we can advertise, we can hire a Madison Avenue public relations team, and there still would be.
How many
Crick-
public do we
crickets.
have online? It isn't like we're not accessible.
Well, remember when we did what was the mission statement and
Strategic plan.
thank you. Maybe we need to add on a strategic plan about encouraging more public participation. We did the customer service.
There's.
Well,
There's-
in there, and I think to Director Thomas's point, we've tried different ways to do that, and we don't always get the response that you might expect. I think that's coming. Now that we roll out a rate design and we have the specifics of what we're talking about, as Director Adderman mentioned, this is the beginning of the 218 process. And so I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that feedback, and we have a specific rate structure that we can now talk about in detail. And so we have not been shy about letting people know that this process is underway and the rate increase is coming. And we haven't seen a lot of public participation yet, but I think we will.
No, and this agenda's been out since Friday, and we've had our meetings on the second and fourth, second and fourth Wednesday of every single month for years. But Director Thomas is correct. We don't get a whole lot of participation from public, no matter what we no matter what we do or
Well,
say.
But I think
We have
where,
seen it where it is.
I think where we're.
2012 was the last time I saw a big crowd here.
What I
Other
think we should strive to do is somehow get that participation, whether it's, we say, we're gonna look for 2 members of the public to sit on a workshop committee to talk about, we're doing a rate thing. I think that would be ideal. We try, but maybe we need to do something more. Obviously it's my first rate study, so I'm challenged. Is that the right word? Either way, I just think if we could somehow try and do more, I would participate in doing that. And I have actually, I've reached out to people as well. But
Where are they?
they're not here. I know that, but they're still, I think we should try and make that happen every meeting. Copper was coming for a long time.
We had Bertha.
I encourage
What-
that, you encourage
something?
that.
Okay.
But anyhow, that's good. You guys hear what I'm saying?
Michael, you alluded to talking to a lot of people. Can we have, what groups or what names or
You mean in
On your
terms of
own, you've been
invites? Yeah,
talking.
so I've invited individuals, including Mr. Dean in the back of the room here today, former CCWD directors, the current county supervisors. It's certain individuals that I know are concerned about this and keeping an eye on it. I've reached out to directly. And I'm offering not only to invite them to these meetings, but offering to meet with them. And I anticipate doing a lot of that over the next couple of months. Prioritizing, being available to people to talk through this and explain, what we're doing, what we're up against and why we're doing it. But we presented a couple months ago in Valley Springs Rotary, for example, and gave them the update that the rate study is in progress. The 5-year financial plan shows that we have significant budget deficit and funding shortfall for our CIP. So rates are going up. I haven't been shy about letting people
Okay,
know.
well, and I think what I'm getting at is the fact that this is the first time that I was able to sit down and, come up with figures
Right.
about, and I'm just,
We didn't
I'm
have-
just blown away. I'm just, so I'm,
We didn't have that information
Well,
until
okay.
this meeting, and that's why I think
Maybe-
now that we
maybe
have
that's- okay.
now that we have that specific detail, now we can go out and talk about specific impacts to customers and different classes of customers in much greater detail than we could have before. So we've been talking about this process being underway, but we didn't have that level of detail until now.
John, do you want to add something?
Is that available? I can speak a little bit more in detail about what we've done for social media and outreach.
I'd like to hear.
Yeah, Cindy would like to know.
So, good afternoon, board.
Good
John
afternoon.
Osborne, your external affairs manager. In looking just back through, our postings, number one, this is the 9th meeting. They're all public meetings. Some of those meetings have been, the finance committee meeting, and some of them have been regular and special board meetings. We posted specifically about this particular meeting today, beginning last week. And the first post that went out, when it had about 3,700 impressions. So that,
Where?
on Facebook,
People looked at it, so that means.
3,700 impressions. So 3,700 people at least glanced at it.
Which is-
About 3,400 people actually interacted with the post, meaning
What's
they
the, what's the
read it.
circulation of the enterprise these days? 1,500?
I'd be taking a guess. I don't know.
I mean, I think at its peak, it was 3,500.
Yeah. And then in addition to that, we do have a small but mighty Twitter following. And so we posted there as well.
How many?
We're
How
up
many
to 22.
22 followers on Twitter?
It's new.
22?
22.
It's new.
It's
Oh.
brand new. I mean, it's about a
I
month
know.
old. In addition to that, we posted again today. When we post the address here for physical attendance. And we also encourage people to attend virtually, or even to call in, and we provide those numbers. In addition to that, we posted to Nextdoor this morning with today's reminder and the agenda. In addition to our regular
And that was
efforts to-
just the agenda though, right?
There was a problem with next door and that you could only go into one neighborhood. What, have we resolved that or what neighborhood are we in?
We're in the Calaveras County neighborhood, which is
Okay.
the whole
County.
county. Yeah.
Oh.
You have to subscribe to it. And we send it out to people that are subscribed to that particular neighborhood, which is the whole county. But I think there's 40 or 70 different communities or next door neighborhoods. That might be a little bit laborious to get through all of those, but
Okay.
I
Any
wonder,
other,
if the caption would have been, come visit us. We're planning on raising your rates if we
Then-
got somebody here.
You know, and that's not, and that's amusing, but that's really true. That's
But you
really
might
true
get
because
people to come
you
down.
could issue a press release and say, oh, CCWD is having a meeting and this and that. But if it doesn't get down to the nitty gritty or it doesn't excite people,
So you're telling us.
Our-
gonna put their
it has
pockets-
the word
our-
rate study.
our post today was all capitals, please join the Board of Directors regular meeting today at 1 PM to discuss the rate structure plan for the next 5 years.
perfect. But it's, you know,
It should be rate
Again.
increase. Either way, I
And that was
appreciate
similar
that.
to the one last week as well.
did you say please last week?
Yes, I always say this.
We require your attendance.
So I think we've been blasting this out as much as we can, but it's going to increase now that we have the rate design. And especially once the Prop 218 notices go out to every single customer in the district. Like I said, I think that's just going to be a huge effort for us over the next couple.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Well, John, you better have all that written down because when we do the hearing and everybody shows up, you can let them know we've been trying to tell you to be
Right.
part of the solution.
One of the great parts about social media and the internet is it's actually chronologically captured on our Facebook page and in our Twitter feed. So it's there for anybody to
And
see.
that's good, but I still think, I for one don't use Facebook. I have something up there that my kids will put pictures of my grandkids. And so not everybody uses it.
Right.
So
Right.
we still
it's
need to
gotta
have
be a
another.
working-
And that's always been a discussion here about how it's great. The internet is great, our Facebook page is great. There are people who do not use that.
Yeah, it's no one
It's-
source that
it's-
we're going to
yeah.
rely on. We're going to hit every different source.
Okay,
of
let's
outreach we can.
move on. Let's get this show on the
Thank you.
road.
Either that or-
Habib,
Thanks, John.
Habib, it's your turn. Please come to the microphone.
I'd like to,
You got your Teflon on?
Did I?
How many personal invitations?
I use my Facebook to invite everybody that I know here.
Okay, and they're here, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Habib,
Um,
have you heard this type of discussion? Have you heard this type of discussion, identical discussion with other entities that you
Many,
worked with?
many times.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Okay.
So it's nothing unique. So,
absolutely.
okay.
All right, so Habib Isaac with owner of IB Consulting, or president, directors. So we're gonna go through this presentation. We also have had workshops with you through this time period that was primarily focused on the financial plan. You can't really get to raise until you know how much you need to recover. So then the financial plan is separated. So you focus solely on how each utility is doing financially. And then once we understand where you are and where you should be, then we identify how should that be recovered by from your customers. Another unique thing here is we're in a very, hyperinflationary climate in this last 12, 18 months, even 2 years. So you're not alone. We work with agencies up and down state, and all I do is utility rates up and down the state of California. We have agencies down south. They're looking at, double-digit increases, not just for 1 year, but for multiple years. We have one where it's 50% increase. A lot of that has to do with just how much of increases are for your capital spending. And the most with utilities are inherently capital intensive. Unfortunately, you don't get to see that. You don't see the product because it's underground. So it kind of loses its sex appeal, if you will. But it's very, very important. So we're going to go through, we're at the point. So we're gonna go through financial plan again, just because it's been a little while. Just a quick refresher of where each utility is at, and then we'll go into the cost of service rate design of each of the utilities. So for the financial planning, I wish I could see this on my screen as well. Give me 1 second, so I don't keep turning away from you guys. So financial planning, one of the things that we do, that why it takes a while to get through this process. Some of these projects take anywhere from 6 to 12 months. We're leaning towards 12 months on this project. We go through the detailed analysis of your budgets with your staff. We basically become experts in your budget documentation, your CAFR, and also your capital spending. So we go through each line item, we identify what your expenses are, and then how those expenses should be increased over time in terms of projections. And not every cost increase at the same rate. So we have different inflationary adjustments to use, whether it be for fuel, utilities, salaries and benefits, wherever the case may be. We have different inflationary adjustments that we work through with staff. And then we also want to model, what is your current usage trends and total EDUs connected to wastewater. So then we know that we've captured all the units of service, the way you charge your customers. So when we're doing projections in the future, we know that we've captured all the units that exist today. And then we check that in relation to your last audit financials to make sure we're in line with what we're calculating compared to what actually came in. So then we know we have a very sound baseline for doing forecasting.
When you did that check, were we in line?
Well, what we have to do is make sure that we're in line, our modeling is in line with what actually occurred.
Okay.
So with water, because a lot of it is still coming in, well, yours is a little bit less than the average, but there's variable revenue coming in. We want to be within 3% of our calculations of what your revenue is compared to your actuals, which we were. And then with wastewater, it's primarily flat charges. We want to be within 1%, which we were. But that takes some time to scrub and clean up the raw billing data to make sure that we identify the correct units. So then we're able to use the revenue projections, and what that allows us to do is make the models dynamic, where if we want to do what if scenarios, what if we see mandatory conservation, and then we want to reduce the sales, then the modeling automatically would then recalculate what the revenue is going to be, as opposed to making some broad assumption of, well, we see a 20% reduction in sales, then we're going to lose 20% revenue. That's not the case, because it depends how much revenue you recover from your fixed charges. So it's very dynamic. And then, there we go again. Oh, oh, okay, got it. And then capital spending. This was an iterative process. We typically will, in our modeling, will identify multiple scenarios for capital spending, because this is one thing that agencies could utilize to smooth out rates. Granted, we don't want to just defer projects, but maybe if maybe some projects are planned for 1 year, that could be spread over 2 years. So that it could really relieve some of that pressure from rates. Then you could identify different option scenarios to model, see how that impacts your rates and your customers differently. One of the first things what I saw in this in the very beginning was, the capital plan, based on the recent master plan and asset management, show that it was almost going to be equivalent to your current asset value. So a couple of questions we asked were, well, is that even possible? Can you even, push that level of project through in 5 years? How much capacity can you have? So those types of things were discussed with staff. And so we don't just take the numbers and call it done, but we're not engineers, but it's just things that we identify and we discuss. We also do it with any type of expenses where we look at previous years, what the cost was of every line item, and we notice a big jump or big decrease, or it goes away. We identify those, and during our staff meetings, we talk about that. Why did this increase so much? Oh, we just reallocated staffing between this division, that division. It could be something as simple as that, or it could be, oh yeah, you know what, you're right. We should probably make sure we use last year's number, not this year's number. So those are important details that we go through as part of our due diligence. And then reserves, it's not just covering your operating costs and covering your capital. Reserves is also an expense. So we're not just trying to make it perfectly even. We want to have very sound, robust reserves. So then you have a strong financial position moving forward, especially when you have existing debt and you're proposing to issue additional debt. Granted, that's not something you're voting on today, but we are showing, and we're still showing issuing debt in the short term to cover your heavy level of capital spending. So then over time, the rates could slowly transition to cover your capital spending on a pay-as-you-go basis, which means not relying on debt to cover those costs. All right, so here's some key important components related to the assumptions. Inflation for 24, we're still showing like high inflation just to be conservative. I know inflation has come down a little bit in like the last month or two, but for 24, we're using just the last annual change. For CPI, it was 5.6, and then in the engineer's news record, construction cost index, it was 7.2. So for this 1 year coming forward, we're using that, and then for all subsequent years, we monitor these indices, and then we're using the 20-year average, which is around 3 to 3.5% on both of them. So after this 1 more year of high inflation, then we're going to go back to historical trends. Growth, we're not assuming any growth because we want to make sure that your revenue needs are recovered by your existing customers today, and we're not relying on growth to occur to cover your revenue needs. Otherwise, if it doesn't occur, then you're going to be short, and then you have to go back to your customers and say, you know what, we messed up, we're wrong. That development we thought didn't happen, so now we have to increase your rates again.
What's our average rate of growth in the last 20 years? Has it ever been completely stagnant?
Yes. There were years where it was
2006?
2008, 9, 10, and 11, we were getting maybe 40, 50 connections a year.
I think in some years it was single digits.
Single digit. Prior to that.
But we could look that up for you.
Close to 400 new connections a year. We have not recovered to that level since the recession.
I have a question.
Yes.
If we're not using any growth in this rate increase and we do get new growth, how is that captured? Where does it go?
That's a good question. So we're showing you rates for the next 5 years. So then if you do see growth come in, then that's additional revenue that we were anticipating, that then you wouldn't have to go up to the maximum amount that we're going to put in the notice. You could then adopt a rate, implement a rate that's lower than that amount. And then that's something we actually do with quite a few of our clients. We do annual updates to see how they actually perform compared to what we were projecting. And our projections, they're sound, but they're also on the conservative side. We're not going to assume a huge increase in usage, right? Just because, like I say, this year was a wet season. We're going to make sure that our assumptions are on the conservative side, so then we set you up for success. But that's what a lot of our agencies we work with, we do. We do annual updates as part of the budgetary process. It takes us like 30 days because we built the models. And then a lot of agencies we find out they do show that they do implement a lower rate than what was proposed. However,
We actually did that in not this last rate 5-year study, but the study before that. We voted on, I think, three years, and we didn't do the third. Over a 5-year
So-
period, we didn't implement the third year at all.
So
Kept
that
the rate.
actually
Right,
identified when we're preparing the next year's budget.
that is correct. However, keep in mind with the capital plan, it has been revised and things have been reduced of things that are maybe not as critical as necessary as they are today. So then it's going to be a question of policy wise, do we reduce that or do we bring forward those projects that are not on the list right now?
That's
That's a
my
lot.
question. Is there a way to capture the excess revenue if we do have a growth spurt and either allocate it to debt service or something else, or can we at least capture it and at least have the board be able to make a decision as to what? I just think, I don't think it's gonna get lost in the mix, but I know we have so many things to do beyond what we're asking to be done right now. I just don't want it to just to be mixed in with everything else and it just goes away.
Well, growth comes with new expenses too. So the cost that we're charging those new customers is the cost of delivery. And so it's not that it creates a surplus for us in the budget necessarily. And especially on the capital improvement side, an example of that is we do have new developments that are proposed in the Valley Springs area. We expect those are very close to moving forward. So we do expect there to be some growth down there. But we pulled projects off of the CIP that if those projects move forward and we receive those connection fees, it's going to have to fund the expansion projects. For example, I mean, the specific example is the Lock and Tenton wastewater treatment plant. So that upgrade that's been on the books for a long time is not fully funded in the CIP. But if those projects come online, those funds are going to have to go towards the cost of upgrading that treatment plant, which means it doesn't necessarily translate to a reduction in the existing CIP projects. So we'll do that on an ongoing basis, on an annual basis. We'll be
Well, but
checking in.
rates aren't gonna subsidize development.
Right. No, but
That's
those
what we're asking about.
the new resources that development brings to the district are going to go towards funding the improvements that we have to make in order to accommodate that development. It doesn't necessarily translate to offsetting projects that are in the, replacement projects that are in the CIP. It might help fund some of those projects, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, we got $5 million in capacity fees, so we can deduct $5 million from the CIP that was funded by rates. We just have to be really careful about, I don't want to overpromise on that front.
Yeah, maybe I should have clarified too, when you have new development, and when I said we didn't account for it, there will also be increasing costs for delivering more water to additional customers. But every single rate that we show you when it comes to the fixed charge and the variable rates, every single dollar is recovering a portion that goes to reserves. So there will be a little bit more net income, but it's not 100% surplus revenue now. There is going to be costs that increase with your.
You mentioned when you were talking about it, about, our policy. Do we have a policy, and what would it be called? Growth income that was not included in rate study? I mean, I don't know. Do we?
I don't know if you could really
If you can.
segment it that way, because
Okay.
it's really going to be rate revenue. Here's total amount came from our fixed charges. Here's total amount came from variable, as opposed to,
Say, it could be the same, it could be property taxes. I
yeah,
mean, There's
right.
a bunch of different.
The bottom
Sort
line,
of the dynamic nature of the capital improvement.
and the bottom line is
Right,
when
it
we're
could
doing our
change.
budget, we're gonna see our projected income, which would be included in that, and then determine if there's a
Yeah.
rate increase.
Yes.
So there is no policy per se.
Okay, so with that, we also look at your utility demand, what's the total amount of sales? So one thing we've been doing with all of our clients, and especially for fiscal year 23, it's been a very, very wet season. So we've been asking for where are you year to date in sales? Because we expect that is coming down from 22, right? Which is always has been the case with all of our clients. So we're actually modeling what that usage is in 23. And then for 24 and beyond, we're going back to a rebound of, assuming it's the same as 22, because we're not going to see, well, we expect that we're not going to see a summer wet season for 24 and beyond that we experienced in 23, where everyone has their irrigation off for 3 to 4 months. And then I already talked about capital spending, but when I say funding depreciation, you're funding at least depreciation. You're funding more to the depreciation in terms of how the extent of your capital plan for the next 5 years. So for example, water, your depreciation value, which just kind of represents how much you should at least reinvest back into the system, is 3.1 million annually. And then for wastewater is 1.3 million. And then you see your averages over the next couple of years is way more than that. So you're bringing forward some pretty hefty projects, and costs have been going up. But then that asset value is going to increase over time, and then that depreciation value is going to tick up a little bit too.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Haven't we done a lot of tightening of the capital spending?
We have been successful in implementing several big projects over the last several
Okay.
years.
He just said that the minute, we start coming up with more money, we're going to be bringing those back in. Is that what you're saying?
Sorry, I
What
thought I.
what I indicated was your capital plan that we're including in our rates analysis isn't everything. There are
Right.
some projects that have been set aside or deferred for later, that's something you could bring forward if there's more revenue that comes in, as opposed to reducing the rates in future years. That's what I was saying is a policy decision of what you want to do, because you do have projects that are not on this list.
And if that happened, it would obviously come to the board for approval.
Right.
Correct. That's part of the new capital plan.
Gotcha.
Okay, then we are proposing or showing that some debt issues in fiscal year 24-25. So not this next fiscal year, but the year after. So revenues have time to build up to cover that. And then we're utilizing those debt issues to then cover the capital spending during the short term. And then reserves, as I mentioned, we make sure that you have healthy reserve balances moving forward. So let's go to the water enterprise. I want to just go through the existing financial position. So what we always do in the beginning is we look at your financials, we look at how you're doing with existing rates. So the question is, do we need to increase rates based on where you are now and where you want to be in terms of, funding your full capital and being at the right level of reserves. So this is your current existing financial position. What this chart is showing is your operating only, your O&M, no capital spending. So with this one, and this is water, the black trend line going across is your current rate revenue. The red dashed lines is your expenses, and you really want this to be flipped. You want that black trend line to be over your expense line. So you're actually showing you have an operating deficit that's ongoing. And then that's what we need to resolve right away. We need to make sure we have positive net income. Next one is your capital spending plan. This is what we're showing here is your capital spending and your revenue sources, your funding sources. So that light purple is your debt funds. This is the existing debt funds that you already have in place. It's not the proposed. That'll show up a little bit later. They're going to do additional funding with debt. We have some capacity fees that are in orange, and then a grant for in 24. And then the dark purple is the amount of capital spending that is being funded directly by pay-as-you-go rates coming in and reserves. Okay, so you'll see that, the capital spending in 27 and 28, that's all coming from your rate revenue coming in during that year. That's a pretty hefty lift for your.
Well, if everything goes right, that grant funding will be 50% of that 27 and 28. If we get on the ball and start doing stuff today, and I asked about that about 4 weeks ago to have to bring to the board and through this process, maybe next meeting or the following meeting, we can get a peek at what grants are out there. And the board might do a little homework on that as well. We would see what grants we haven't applied for yet. But this is the time to be doing it for 27, 28, and to see no grants planned as a plan for a district, that's not acceptable. We need grant money in those years big time, and every other year. We have it in 24, and there's no reason we can't get it in 25 and 26.
And in our financial planning, we would not put that in unless it's.
No, I understand. That's
secure.
one of the things that may change between
Yeah.
now and then, that we can add
Right.
more capital projects or reduce rates or not implement the rates that we voted on
Absolutely.
now. So
Correct.
there is some wiggle room between now and 27 on
Right.
whatever we do.
Yeah.
Just to
and I
clarify
had the
this.
same discussion about the grants and.
Right, and I just want to clarify that the fact that we're not showing any grant funds in the CIP for those years doesn't mean we're not aggressively
Exactly.
pursuing grants for projects that are going to be implemented in those years. We are, and we hope that those projects will be funded by, at least partially by grant funds, but we don't have those grants yet. So we can't include it in the financial plan until we've actually secured those grants.
Okay, but I think the issue is we need to know that we are, going out after these grants. We don't have to, give us an accomplishment, but let us know what they are and how far you've gotten. And I thought, didn't we ask for a status at a board meeting or?
You know, if you may have one, I don't know, but if there's any kind of a grant funding plan, you could identify your projects, you know, when you go look at grants and you have different criteria. So maybe list on this project, it has these 5 criterias of past history and so forth. So when the grants come out, you can identify them by identify the projects as the criteria to see if it's a good match to apply for.
Yeah.
And anybody can almost do that.
So we're gonna look at that as we always do. Every project that moves forward, we're gonna look to find other sources of funding. You know, it's an ongoing effort.
I'm just wondering if we should create some kind of a grant funding committee for those folks. I don't know.
Status.
But you know, identifying like what I just said, so anybody, you could say your engineering assistant, hey, here's the grant, see what projects match the criteria, just looking at criteria, not big in depth, because then that takes time from staff, but just looking at the criteria, you know, sometimes, is it a DAC? There's criteria.
Yeah, and I think you
know what I'm
asked,
saying, is that
We do
you
that
ask them
with
to-
every project. We're gonna look at whether there are sources of funding that project will meet the criteria for the different pop.
well,
money.
when you're actually looking at that grant, what I'm trying to say, and maybe you
get it.
hear it, is just that if you just have it identify those criteria in a spreadsheet or whatever, and somebody could follow up in 5 minutes if anything matches, and then give it to the right people for further research.
yeah, and as I,
If it's a match.
yeah, you've asked for that before, Cindy.
Okay. I don't remember, but I mean, we always want to look for grants.
Right.
So,
So
Do
through our review of the operating position, your capital spending, this is your reserve. So this really is the brass tacks here of how are you really looking financially moving forward. So you have very limited reserves right now. And then based on absorbing that operating deficit and fully funding the capital that is in the plan that has been reduced, it's going to deplete your reserves and then go into a deficit. So that means either one, we have to not fund any capital, which obviously that's not the case, or we have to resolve it where we build up rate revenue to the point that it fully funds your capital and builds the reserves back up with your minimum reserve is reflected with the red dash or the red bar going across. And that red bar is the operating capital replacement and rate stabilization. And that shows up on this next slide here. So here are the what we need for this is rates need to increase, cover the operating deficit, and then reserves are below the minimum. Your operating reserve is at 90 days of operating expenses. That's very common for utilities. The capital reserve is annual depreciation, which is the minimum amount that you should be reinvesting in your system. Rate stabilization is 10% of operating revenues. Emergency is 3% of your asset value. And then giving all that collectively in a dollar amount, it's 11.7 million for 2024. So that's one thing we want to make sure we achieve as part of our proposed financial plan. So with our proposed financial plan, one of the key drivers to this is that's a big driver to this is your debt coverage based on of your existing debts, obligations. You need to have 125% coverage. So in fiscal year 2024, with the adjustments that we're showing here, you are achieving the coverage of 131%. However, to achieve that, not only do we have to have a higher adjustment in 24 to the rates, we also are, based on your financial advisor, Eric Scriven, we're also using rate stabilization reserves to buy down the principal amount of that debt in 24. So those ones that could retire soon, he's buying those down to be able to meet that coverage. So you're going to be using your rate stabilization reserve, which is $520,000, to buy down the principal amount of your existing debt to make sure you're not out of compliance with your debt coverage ratio. And then once that is done, then we just show you the first 2 years, because then you see the slope increases with that dashed line going up. So then your coverage is more than 130%. And then you also see on this chart, You also start generating positive net income, which is those gray bars instead of those being red. So now you have additional funding above your operating expenses to then go towards your capital spending and rebuild your reserves. Here's your capital spending. Now this also includes not just your existing debt, but the proposed debt in 2025 of 16.5 million. That's reflected in those light violet bars. That's being funded by debt. So really, the only amount that's being funded by rates on a pay-as-you-go basis is, the 24, a little bit of that, which is the dark purple. And then by 28, you then transition from using debt to funding your capital with your rate revenue that comes in on an annual basis.
Hold on.
Yes.
Yeah.
It looks to me like we're just using debt.
Right.
Yes. Yes, you're leveraging debt.
Is that what he said?
Yes.
You're leveraging debt in the short term, which is that light
At
violet.
what rate?
Right now, we're in our modeling, we're assuming a 5% interest rate for the debt obligation. And most likely you're gonna get a rate that's lower than that. But again, we want to be conservative. So
Well,
then,
we are using today's interest rate.
Going forward.
Well, at least in the near future.
So the 5% probably lower than what you can get right now, but I think that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the projection is hopefully by the time we need to reissue debt, it would be
Well,
5% or lower.
I'm not sure about with public financing. I mean, for like a mortgage, yeah, for sure, but not for public agencies.
Might be able to come in lower than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now, the loans we took out last year, 2%, 2 to 3.
Ma'am? Yes, please.
Just. I'm not used to carrying around this thing.
The current loan that we have, which is just under 20 million, is at 2.9%. And that is included in the first several years that you see of the light purple. The future ones that are coming in, I think you looked at 5 and 5.25, something along that.
Yeah, we're doing 5 over 20 years.
Starting in which year, which year will that 20 million be absorbed?
That would be in this, the second or the
25.
third and fourth year,
Yeah.
when you see the light purple.
26,
So are we,
27.
do we also assume that any debt on any infrastructure that we build, that the debt won't outlast the lifespan of the facility?
At this particular point, when we go banks, it's 20 years. So it's not the debt will not outlive
Right.
the life of the asset.
The sewer asset,
Pardon me?
or sewer facilities last more than 20 years?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Anything that we're gonna finance, we're gonna make sure that we're not paying debt on it longer than the life of the facility.
and we're looking like one of the things we're funding is the genuine AV transmission line. And obviously that's gonna last more than 20 years.
So we're not talking about going after additional debt until the year 26 or 27.
No, 25, 26.
24, 25 is when the debt would be issued. And then that debt amount, the proceeds would be used for 25, 26, 26, 27.
And that's assuming, or that's knowing that the $20 million debt that we incurred last year will be used up by then?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
And just as a footnote, when we issue debt, it's tax exempted. So that gives us a lower rate than taxable debt. So when we're talking about 5%, it's not like the 5% taxable rates that you get. It's equivalent to 5.5%, maybe 6%. So we get a discount because it is tax-free because we're investing in infrastructure and the government allows tax-free issuance for those type of issue. Tax-free debt for those type of infrastructure projects.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
And then with the revenue adjustments, utilizing the debt proceeds of the proposed debt Then this is where your reserves would be projected. Those big spikes in 25 and 26 is because the proceeds go into your capital reserve. That's how you get the additional influx of funding. And then it's drawn down as you go to 27 and 28. Whereas in 28, we're making sure you're staying above your minimum requirement, which is the operating, the capital reserve, and the rate stabilization. Any questions on this slide when it comes to the reserve balances? Being none. All right, so we saw where you need to be. How's that going to be incorporated over the 5-year plan? So now the question is now how are we going to recover this from our customers and what will the ultimate rates be from a fixed charge as well as the variable rates? So here are the revenue requirements that are related to that financial plan. You don't need to look at every single line item, but basically that bottom line shows the revenue required from rates. In 2024, it's 14.8 million. And then by the time we get to 2028, your water enterprise utility will be a $27 million enterprise. And most of that is for funding your capital needs, the pros debt, and the operations. And then for our cost of service analysis, we're going to be using fiscal year 2024 to go through what is our new updated proposed fixed charges as well as the variable rates. Yes.
What are the revenue offsets?
Revenue offsets are other operating revenues and non-operating revenues. So one of your biggest ones is property tax. So then those are revenues that offset your expenses. So then the remainder is what needs to come from your rates.
And they're in the negative.
They're offset because we're showing you expenses and that's a revenue. So it's offsetting the expense obligation.
So in and out.
Yeah, it's in and out. Correct. Otherwise, the 14.8 million for 24 would be like 19 million. Okay. So here's the cost of service components for 2024 and actually the full financial rate study. So on the left-hand side, we're showing you account services and meter capacity. So this is showing you your fixed components. And that's going to represent 75% of all the revenue needs coming into the district. So you have a very high fixed charge amount, and we're making sure we're maintaining that. And it's recovering 75%. So when you see account services, that's the amount, think of it as a base charge to have an active account. So then that amount is spread over all bills uniformly. And then when you see the number under meter capacity, that means the size of the meter does matter. So then if you have a bigger size meter, you're going to be charged a little bit more of that $9 million because it's related to capacity, the capacity you're taking in the system. And then on the right-hand side is your variable components, where one is delivery. So the delivery, you kind of think that similar to the account services. But on the variable side, basically every unit of water is funding is recovering the $2.1 million. And then on the peaking side, that's where we're looking at the usage trends of your customers and how much water demand they put on the system during like summertime versus wintertime between your different customer classes. So then the way you use your water, you will pay more, or based on tiers, the higher tiers will pay more. One analogy you can use is like driving a car. If you share a car with somebody and they drive like a race car and you drive very modestly, then the person driving a race car should pay more of the maintenance costs. So think of it in that manner. So with the bi-monthly fixed charges, I'm showing you the capacity ratio. So that's just like how much more the meters with the bigger size meters will pay for the meter capacity. We're showing the total number of meters by size, where most of your customers are the 5/8. And then we're showing you the account service charge. So as I mentioned, that's a uniform rate for every active account. So that shouldn't change as the meter size changes. That's $25.69. And then the meter capacity, that's where it does change based on what size meter you have. So if I take the 110, that's for the 5/8, the 3/4, which has a capacity of 1.5 of a 5/8, is paying 50% more. So that's 110 times 1.5 gets you the 165. The 1 inch is 110 times 2.5 gets you the 275, so on and so forth. And then the sum of those two makes up the new bi-monthly fixed charge. Whoops, I went too far. And then showing you the full schedule of the 5 years. Once we identify 24, then 25, 26, 27, 28 is equivalent to the revenue adjustments that I previously showed you. So you'll see from 24 to 25 is going to go up roughly around $25, and then $15, and it gets a little bit tighter and tighter. But these are big increases. This isn't something to take lightly, like it's no big deal, but these are pretty hefty. And this is what is necessary for you to continue to operate your system, fund your revenue requirements, and have healthy reserves and meet your debt coverage. Remember, one of the primary drivers of this in fiscal year 22, that 22% increase, a big driver of that is meeting your debt coverage, where you don't really have much movement of what else can I do to shift this around. Whereas once you get to later years, now debt coverage isn't an issue. You're up in like 300%. You're fine.
I just have a quick question. Have you, on these capacity ratio
Yeah.
charges, the 1 and the 150?
Yeah.
I don't know, 2.5 years ago or thereabouts, there was a lot of discussion over many meetings about fire flows. And I don't know, did we ever issue larger meters for fire flow?
Yeah, so and that doesn't change here. So if new residential construction has to have a larger meter in order to meet those fire flow requirements, we'll still issue the larger meter at the 5/8 inch base rate charge.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure.
And we took that into account as well. So we reviewed that information, and then the number of meters that we have under the 5/8 is also includes meters that are bigger, but it was only because of fire flow requirements of the new building codes. So they're not getting penalized, if you will, for having a meter because of the new building codes where they could be served.
To make this chart more accurate, it shouldn't say meter size. It should say the size of the meter we're charging that customer,
Sure.
not actually what they have in their front yard.
Okay.
Okay.
Or an equivalent.
Yeah, meter equivalent.
But that's
Not that we need it.
Very small.
Not that we need a correction or anything.
Yeah.
We know what it
Probably
is.
leave it.
Yeah, there were some industry guys that came in here and said, we need larger meters, and then they ended up not putting them on.
Right. It's a very small number of cases where that's actually been
Oh, yeah.
an issue.
So this, back to that previous
Yes.
slide, Habib.
Yes.
So in fiscal year 2028, the fixed portion of a 2-month bill in 2028, based on the rate study,
The financial plan.
is $248
Yeah.
for a 2-month use, plus the variable charge, which isn't even in there yet.
That is correct. And keep in mind, your fixed charges are probably one of the highest around because of how much you're recovering on the fixed side. The average utilities in the utility industry in California, well, I'd say more in the nation, really. Prior to mandatory conservation, like 2015, it was you want to be at 30% fixed cost recovery.
And we're
Right.
at 75.
You're 75. But then after the drought and mandatory conservation, utilities started ticking up that fixed cost recovery because how much they got impacted from revenue losses. Now, I would say every time I go to an agency, the average now probably in the mid 40s. And then there's some that are 50s, but you're definitely on the higher end. There's a couple that are in line with you that I can think of off the top of my back. Citrus Heights that I work with, they're around 70%. And then the highest one I can think of is Elk Grove Water District. They're like 80% fixed cost recovery.
Would you put that into money for me, please?
Sure. So I don't know if about money, but basically what it's doing is ensuring that you have very stable revenue on the water side, and then the amount of water used on the variable side. It reduces the amount of incentive, if you will, for people to use less water to be water efficient, because there's so much recovery on the fixed side where the variable side doesn't matter as much. However, it does make it more stable and you have more sound revenue sufficiency moving forward.
But also the reality is that the consumption does not cost the district
Yes,
hardly anything.
right. That is true.
So
Most of your
it's
costs are
better,
fixed.
instead of trying to recover it off of consumption, it's better to have it be a fixed, knowing that you're gonna get it every week
Right.
or every month, or
Okay.
every 2 months.
And
Yeah.
I think it does make sense for us, and we looked at, especially when we heard that we were on the high end of that, compared to other agencies, we took a closer look at it, and I think it makes a lot of sense for us to do it that way, just because of the nature of our district and how we operate and how we're funded.
And
We're at the mercy, we're at the mercy of the state of California. If they come in, whether we're in a drought or not, we've never been in a drought. As far, we're probably one of the most water-rich counties per capita, in the state. But we're still mandated to, reduce our revenue, which is what they've asked us to do. Hey, collect less money, by forcing us into a restrictive, conservation.
Which is exactly why we changed it.
Yeah, no.
More on the fix. That was done in our last rate study 5 years ago.
And by doing that last rate study, we also looked at, well, what are you actually recovering now? Because usage trends change, you have more accounts, right? So then just the recovery changes a little bit year to year. And the last year it was 82%. So when we show 75%, from where you are today, just from how things have transpired, we're actually reducing the amount coming from the fixed charge, but staying in that 75% range that was probably the target before. So I just want to make sure you keep that in mind too. We're actually in this one, we're bringing it back down to a level of 75%. So basically, if we kept it at 82 where you are today, these rates would be even higher. And then on the variable side, there is a little bit of change in the rate design itself. We just have 3 tiers for residential. And the base of the tiers, we also want to make sure that besides having tiers and like making sure what components we're including, what the rates are, we also want to make sure we have a sound basis for the breakpoints of the tiers. So for tier 1, we're using the winter average of the actual usage characteristics of your customers. Tier 2, we're using the summer average. So then if you within tier 2, based on the average, it'll cover you through, you should be within tier 2 for summertime. And then tier 3 is anything in excess. So people use way more than that, depending on what type of property they have. Then tier 3 captures the rest. So basically we're eliminating tier 4 because we want to make sure we have a sound basis of what's the breakpoint between tier 3 and tier 4. Right? And we don't want to say, well, we'll just assume 50% more. We want to have a really more stronger nexus than being somewhat arbitrary, because those are items that people would then identify and challenge the study on.
Whatever happened to the doing away with the tier? I thought we were supposed to do away.
I don't think we've looked at doing away with the tiers entirely. We always need to make sure that we have there's a basis for the delineation between the tiers.
Remember to carry it.
Yeah, don't drag it.
If I'm not mistaken, Director David, I think what we were talking about is the last rate study in 2018, we did away with providing customers 1,000 CF of free water within their base rate. And then we went to the different tiered systems, a 4-tiered system, and adjusted that. But
I thought it was discriminatory or something was happening.
Only if you can't justify the basis for the tiers. So as long as you can point to here's why.
It can't be punitive.
It can't be punitive.
It can't
Yeah.
be used as an incentive for conservation or, you know,
Right.
it just has to be tied to the cost of why you're getting bumped into the next tier.
Okay, so
There's
then
an
my
increase in
question was,
cost.
why is there a different tier structure? What justifies the change?
Yeah, sure. So one, the breakpoints, I already told you why we're eliminating tier 4, because we want to have a sound basis of the breakpoints between them. So we feel we have a sound basis for when do you go into tier 2 and what's that basis is the summer average. Or I'm sorry, going from tier 1 is the winter average. Tier 2, tier 3 is the summer average. And then for the peaking component that you show the unit rates here, that's based on looking at the usage characteristics of your peak demand period during the summer and how water was used during that time period for these different breakpoints. And then we allocated the cost to those tiers based on the demand they're putting on your system during peak time.
And that is tied to actual cost increase for the district and mainly in our electrical cost. There is an additional cost to the district and also in treatment, for.
So we can defend that just. based
Yeah,
on-
we're very confident in these tiers.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Russ.
I have a question. We've had quite an abundance of large bills that we've had to adjust for people that have breaks in their system, breakdown in the piping. And I apologize for not asking this earlier, but if you have a break in a pipe that the customer is not responsible for, it's just an act of God or a tree growth or something like that, and they consume, like in one instance, it was 1.2 acre feet over a period of 2 months. Specifically, my question is it fair to charge them at this tiered rate, the higher tiered rate, rather than the regular residential rate?
Yeah, a lot of agencies have policies when it comes to breaks in the system for giving relief to a customer for like one-time occurrences, things of that sort. But that's all strictly policy. That's not, and then if there was something like that in the raw data that was anomaly, then we would identify that and remove it and make it more of the average or what it was the previous year during that time.
But I think also to answer your question, that yes, I think it is fair because there is an additional cost to the district for that higher amount of consumption, even if the consumption, whether the consumption is a leak or actual, beneficial use, there still is that the district still has that additional increase in cost to provide that quantity of water. It's not a huge incremental increase, which is why the majority of our rates are recovered in the base rate and the tiers are relatively, a minor portion of the funding, but there is an additional cost there for the district.
Okay, but I maybe our external relations committee can look at this, but I have the distinct feeling that we're charging the customers that experience those breaks at a higher rate than a commercial contractor would be paying per 100 gallons, 100 cubic feet. And I don't, I just have a hard time philosophically justifying, charging somebody more than it costs a person who goes out and sprays it on the road.
You're talking about someone who comes. and
Well,
picks it
yeah,
up and
there's a big difference between
person
providing
that delivers
service.
to them?
Yeah.
That's there's a huge cost difference.
Big difference between providing service directly to that property though, and providing a fill station for a truck to fill up at. And so what we're very confident here in is the increase in cost that results from that additional consumption at that property is justified by, we're justified in bumping them into those higher tiers because there is additional electrical cost, additional treatment cost. There is additional burden on the district that we don't want to push onto other customers. It's that customer's consumption, even if it was inadvertent, accidental consumption, it's still their consumption.
You're going to have to try harder to convince me because it costs, the place in Copperopolis where we fill the most water trucks is Coppertown Square. And there are a lot of I mean, 99% of the residential properties in Copperopolis are closer to the plant than Coppertown Square.
But
So
they're
so
receiving
that-
service at their property. So if we were to locate a meter at the property where the construction was taking place to provide service directly to that customer, solely for that customer, there would be a different cost associated with that than there is by using a hydrant meter.
Well, but we can argue this at a later point, but you use the example of a, huh?
Add that to the external.
We
affairs.
will,
We'll take care
we'll
of it.
give you a full
Relations.
Yeah, well, external something.
affairs and relations.
Skip, I just want to make sure I understand how this is working. So if you're in tier 1, for every HCF, is that household cubic foot? What is that?
100 feet.
100 cubic feet. Yes.
748 gallons.
So in tier 1,
Mhm.
for every HCF, you're charged $2.07 more,
Up
up to
to,
15. And then once you go into 16, then that tier and so forth.
then unit
So-
16 would be charged 225.
Okay, and that's in addition to the fixed rate.
Yes, and one thing I didn't mention is, even though we eliminated tier 4, we're also expanding the width of tier 1, which is your cheapest water.
Mhm.
Before, right now, currently, it's up to 10 units. We're expanding that to 15 units. So they gain 5 more units on the tier 1.
What is the average household cubic foot used monthly?
23 units,
23.
or, yeah,
That's the average?
that's summer. We have it a little bit later. I believe it was. No, it's 23 during for bi-monthly. 23
These
units.
are, this 15 number is a bi-monthly as well, so we're looking at. If it's.
Yeah, that's
so
just tier
what are
1.
they- What's the average per month?
23, which should land somewhere in the middle of the tiers,
Tier 2.
which it does.
How come we don't, if the average monthly is out there, why wouldn't that tier limit be at that average monthly?
Because the tier 1, we're going off of winter average, not the annual average.
Oh,
And then tier 2 is the summer. So we're giving because some customers, they use water very efficiently throughout the whole year. That's reflective of like more just indoor use. They might have drought tolerant plants. They don't use much outdoor. So we want to give them the benefit of having a reduced rate for that type of use.
And they would have no variable rate, no variable charge in their bill if they stay below 15.
No,
Well,
they would
the-
always be in tier 1.
Yeah, they'll pay just the tier 1
so
rate.
they'll be charged minimum 15? No.
No,
There's no
Whatever they
free, no
use,
free
like
water,
15,
no-
gotcha.
no free delivery at all.
yeah, that's you can't include water in your fixed charge anymore. Once the California, you have to be fully metered, and then metered consumption must be billed. So you can't just give free water out.
Yeah.
Yes.
If somebody in the tier 1, rate, how many gallons per day does that come out to? And does that meet the goal that the state is trying to shove down everybody's throat?
I could answer that. So 55 gallons per capita per day will come out to around, like 3 people, around 6 units of water, 7 units of water. So this is like
Our tier 1 customers, what is that?
It'd be 7. which
It'd be more than
is
double.
15.
It'll be more than
I'm
double.
asking about gallons per day.
Yeah, this is more like 110
Which
gallons.
is almost double
Right.
what the state is trying to get to, right? Aren't the state trying to get to 55 gallons per day?
That's correct. That's correct, but that would not be, that is correct, but that would not be a
So it's pretty close. Then if you're looking at 2 point something per occupant. So it's a little bit under.
Oh, I'm sorry though, but this is bi-monthly, so it's very close to the 7, right? Because I was thinking
You guys
7,
understand what I'm getting? at
7
here?
is,
Yeah.
7 is 1 month.
But we base the tiers off cost of service, not those conservation targets.
Mhm. But you're right in line. You're almost right in there. They're using basically that amount in the winter. So that works out really well.
Well, I'm just thinking to use that as a tool because that is where the state is trying to force us to go.
Mhm.
All the more reason to have, a fixed more of the fixed rate coming in,
Yes.
you know, because they don't really want us to sell water. So, all right.
And then similar to fixed charge, I'll show you the 5 years of rates for the variable. So these are a little bit more modest because there's less revenue coming from your variable rates than your fixed charges. And then tier 4, you just show that it's NA when it goes to the new rate structure. And we also have your current rates on there as well. And then I just want to show you a couple of customer impacts. So this is showing you a single family residence with the 5/8 meter, which is most of your customers. And at 15 units, 23 units, and 30 units. So basically hitting all the different tiers. So the 15 units, they use the full amount of tier 1, they stay within tier 1. They'll see a 20% increase, even though the revenue needs is 22%. So they're using, they're getting, their impact's a little bit less than that. The average customer is 25. That's primarily, why is it more than the revenue adjustment? Primarily because we're also getting rid of a tier. So then that's putting that cost recovery that was in tier 4 into the tier 1 and tier 2 combined. And then, but still, when we go out to those that are used a lot more water, they'll see a higher increase because they are using more, water less efficiently.
And this comparison from previous is for 2024.
2024 is what we're showing. Yes, that's correct. And it's comparing
With the
your,
assumption that we're doing a 22% increase in the first year
yes,
and assuming that these three categories of use.
yes,
Okay.
compared to your current bill today.
Okay.
And then we want to show you where you landing, where do you land now? And where are you going to land in terms of with your neighboring communities? So the light purple is your current rate. The dark purple is the proposed rate. And then this is showing all the other agencies that we did a rate survey for.
Is this CPUD hasn't implemented theirs yet? Is this their new or their old?
That's the new,
That's the new one.
Okay.
And this is for 2024.
but theirs was approved.
That is correct.
Right.
This is for 2024. That is correct.
What do you have for 2027?
I don't have that, but I could put it in and then I have to go back and look at those other agencies to see if they have adopted rates through 27. If they don't, then it's not going to be apples to apples because they're most likely going to do rate studies. For
He's just saying,
he's being facetious, yes.
he just, go ahead.
All right.
Come on.
So, we went,
Close to GCSD at year 20.
Why don't we find?
we went through water. I just want to see maybe this is a good
We're
break
gonna take a
point
break,
if
yeah,
you would like,
for-
and then we go to race.
5-minute break.
It's GCS.
The hustle.
That guy.
Now we're just waiting for her. He'll find his way. Okay, we're back in session from a 5-minute,
Go ahead, minutes.
5.5 minute.
I want to
Break.
vote on something.
And we're gonna go into our wastewater discussion. Habib, the floor is yours again.
All right, thank you so much.
No,
This is gonna,
thank you.
this is gonna be similar to the water enterprise. So we're gonna go through that same process. First, we're gonna look at what's your financial position based on existing rates. So with this one, and I compare it to water, you do have positive net income. Starting with 24 through 26, you see your black trend line is your existing rate revenue coming in. The red dashed line is your expenses. So the revenues are above your expense, which generates those gray boxes at the bottom. That is net income that could go towards capital spending, but without any adjustments, we're projecting costs to increase, over time. So then it would generate smaller net revenue, net income each year. So then we want to make sure that that doesn't occur. And then here's your capital funding and with sources. So you have a lot of, significant projects in the next 2 years, and then it goes back down to just your typical R&R. And then also your funding sources. So you also have a big grant for 24 projects. And then you'll see it transitions to pay-as-you-go funding, but we will be needing to use a little bit less debt for wastewater compared to water. And then similarly, here's your reserve balance. It's less than the minimum, just like water was. And then with the limited amount of net income from your operating, all your capital spending that is separate from debt is basically hitting your reserves. So your reserves will be depleted as you continue with those capital projects, which have already been reduced, just like water was. So this is very much the streamline of capital spending. So with wastewater, that net income is decreasing each year. You have the same type of reserves. So the total amount for 24 collectively would be 5.1 million is the amount of your minimum. And then existing rates, reserves would need to be used to cover capital expenses. Clearly, that's not sustainable long-term. And you're already below your minimum reserve requirement. So looking at the proposed financial plan, these are 14% adjustments, but then you'll see in the last year, it goes down quite a bit to 3%. So that goes your typical common, very modest adjustment that basically you corrected the ship, you're funding all those projects that you need to do, and then you're back to your typical just ongoing R&R reinvestment in your system. In this utility, unlike water, debt coverage is not an issue. Debt coverage is not a driver that's causing us to go up to 14%. The 14% is really just level adjustments to cover your operating, generate enough net income to do pay-as-you-go funding for your capital program. Okay, so water debt coverage was a significant driver. Wastewater is not a driver at all. But we're still showing your coverage ratios. And then with wastewater, we are proposing 6 million to fund your capital needs in those in 25, fiscal year 25 through 28. And when I show you what that does, it really just covers the rest of 25 and then about half of 26 in your capital spending. And then after that, all your capital spending is rate funded, or you're not utilizing debt. So now you went through that transition. And then if you continue to just mostly adjust your rates, you're going to be able to just do pay-as-you-go funding for your capital spending. And then one thing I'll point out too, just from my experience, agencies that take care of their capital and reinvest in their system are typically agencies that see modest adjustments year in, year out, like single digits. As long as you just keep making those single digit adjustments, then you're doing well. It's agencies where either they push the can down the road and then they defer capital. Those are usually when you're going to see big increases, or or like in this example, you just have that debt coverage. That's a driver. But I think, you know, when you get back to this endpoint and we showed you that 3% of wastewater, I would anticipate that you're probably going to see those single adjustments, you know, single digit adjustments in later years outside of this 5-year window. And one thing I also didn't mention was that we're just looking at 5-year window because that's the full amount. That's the extent you go out to with Prop 218. So Prop 218 is structured in a way where you have to come back and do this again. Yeah, come back and do this again. So it kind of provides transparency and see what the district is doing to set rates. It also captures new usage trends. You know, these trends now compared to 10 years ago are way different with the drought and mandatory conservation that occurred. And then here's your reserves. We're not trying to, you know, get up to that target amount. We're just making sure you're maintaining and you're staying right above your minimum requirements. And this shows that just being very smooth and leveled over those years. And that little tick up in 25 is because of the $6 million in debt proceeds that then come in as influx revenue. All right, so this one is a lot simpler when we're talking about wastewater versus water. Here's your revenue requirements in 24, it's 7.8 million. By 28, it gets up to almost $12 million. But this is all EDUs, which is equivalent dwelling units. So what this is showing is really we just go straight to rates because there's not like a fixed charge and then variable rates when it comes to wastewater. It's really just all flat charges. We're showing where you are today in current 210 and non-residential 206. So to 2024, you'll go up to 239. But one thing we are doing in terms of rate restructuring is we're making the rate per EDU the same for residential and non-residential. I don't know what would be the basis or rationale as to why non-residential would have a lower rate per EDU than residential. Typically, the unit rate per EDU should be the same, but then commercial gets assigned more EDUs because of their strength, which is what occurring. If we look at,
We don't measure by strength. We don't bill by strength. At all.
I didn't indicate that. What I indicated was you assign more EDUs to commercial customers. So like if I look at total commercial accounts, say it's 50. I look at total EDUs that's assigned to those 50, your EDUs are like 110, which means you're assigning more EDUs to non-residential because they have more demand on your system than a residential equivalent customer does. So that's how you make it equivalent between residential and commercial.
How did you come to that determination? That
What's that?
It's based on it's based on the type of use and the fixture count and the, you know, the size of the facility, water projected
should
water
be,
consumption.
water going in, water going out.
Right, exactly.
So are we, so you're saying, and because how many gallons per day does a typical commercial EDU use?
Well, so that's what, I think that's what he'd be saying is that EDU is going to be same for residential. One EDU is the same for residential as it is for commercial, but we evaluate commercial uses for the quantity that they're going to, you know, put in the system and then charge the.
Well, then it has to be equal to whatever our average
Residential.
residential.
Yes, that's
Is
what you're doing with
'Cause I'll
EDUs.
have to see that. I'll have to see some math that makes that work out.
Yeah, we're not changing the EDUs in any way. The EDUs were assigned to commercial properties as they came online. So we're not making any changes to your EDU assignments at all. We're keeping that.
We're jacking the commercial rate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
We're
but
just
the
making
whole,
the EDU the same, and it should be the same.
when they assign EDUs,
But I'm asking you to prove that it is the same. I mean, their average is our, say you got 10 houses, okay, and they have an average consumption or I know it's an assumption on residential because we don't know what they're using typically in the outside. But so we're making an assumption there. Does a typical, does a 10 EDUs of our commercial, do they equal what our assumption is?
Yeah, I
the
mean,
residential?
that's as close as we can. I mean, it's not an exact science, but that's the process that we go through in the engineering review of any commercial use we assign a number of EDUs for each commercial use.
You assign it when they're a new customer.
Or if there's a change of use,
Okay.
that's the other time when we can reevaluate it. But for the most part, it's set when the building is built or the business comes into the CCWD system.
Well, I think there's other reasons too that commercial rate should be less. For instance, if you've got 10 EDUs, you still get one bill. So we're not managing it as if it's 10 different units.
Yeah, but billing, I mean, that's the same case when you have meters as well on the water side. Like every single meter gets charged one bill, even though they might put a huge demand on the
Correct, but
system.
a commercial ratepayer with 10 EDUs, he has one meter and one gets one bill.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just one example, but I mean, it's I can think of at least that making, I don't know what the differential was, but
Well,
the administration of the account itself is cheaper when you have multiple.
What are you looking for?
It's $4.
Reevaluate EDUs assigned?
I don't know that we should make the change to the cost for commercial. I mean, I can see that, particularly significant EDUs should be a little bit cheaper because even just the administration of the account.
So that's one thing we could look at. We could spread the account charge based on number of accounts, number of bills.
What's the difference? How much did this?
$4. It's on there in current, 110 versus 206. I mean, sorry, 210 versus 206. That's your current charge. It's a difference of $4.
So if you're, think about, I mean, I'm not quite sure where you're going with it, but if you're a restaurant, I don't know how many EDUs they, a
They could
typical,
have 20.
well, they could, but
So that
what
would
do
be,
they,
in that
they're gonna
case,
have a
20,
drain in the
20 times four.
floor, 3 sinks in the kitchen, a bathroom.
Right.
What's that got to do with anything? All we care about is how
fixtures.
much goes down we don't care about the fixture.
Well,
We care about
Well,
what
that's
goes
how
down
we
the
That's the only way of determining from a commercial account
No,
what
there
the
is a
start.
usage is how you can determine it. And it's a combination of the two.
Right.
What I'm saying is the management of a commercial account, particularly a restaurant who has a multiple of say 20, is, I mean, the $4 is justified. I'm not gonna die on this hill, but I mean, 4 times 20 times 2 every month.
What happens when somebody makes a small commercial building and they've got 4 suites? The assumption or the policy is to assign multiple EDUs for this small suite, got 1 toilet, one sink. And they pay that. They either close up or they pay it. But they have, we have a policy that says if they think that they're being improperly charged, they've got to pay it for 2 years and then they can come in and ask for a reassessment. And I don't know if anybody ever does that. I mean, I'm agreeing with you that there's some problems with the way that we do that for commercial buildings, and that's an impediment for commercial growth.
If it used to be a restaurant and now it's, I guess that would, because if it changes uses, we. look at it
Usually
again.
would recalculate.
Only if it changes in. the
Type of
2 years.
business.
We would reevaluate the assessment of how many EDUs are charged to that commercial customer.
But am I right or wrong that Cindy and I are gonna open up a little commercial building, have 4 suites, 4 meters? The district would charge for 2.5 EDUs because the assumption is on that rate schedule, we have an 8.5 by 11 sheet that shows what we are capable of charging. And you start off day one with multiple EDUs for a building that may be closed 5 days a week.
Well,
And
and we can't change the rate based on operating hours, right? We have to evaluate it based on what the system capacity can handle. And that's why, I think it makes sense to come up, create that equivalent dwelling unit structure that then is applied, just proportionately.
But that has never made any sense to me, that if you have a house that has 3 bathrooms and it's 1 EDU, you have a small little commercial building that has 1 toilet and 1 sink, and you charge the equivalent of 6 toilets and 6 sinks for a commercial building, small
Depending on
little
the type.
suite. No, I don't know, real estate building, so.
One thing I just wanted to point out is that there is a minimum EDU charge requirement, so one, right, so your point is correct. However, as you start to look at larger commercial businesses, that EDU calculation then really comes into play, and it's allocating the capacity available for that demonstrated source of supply, water supply through the sewer system. It should happen at any point in time. So you're basically, it's a placeholder in effect. So if the business is, it's got 10 bathrooms, well, we need to ensure that there's a capacity that it's available in the sewer side
And they
for those
pay,
10 bathrooms.
and they pay for that.
The one thing too that I think, bears further consideration is what is the EDU that CCWD has? It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, is a 3-2, how, and so I think that's also, aside from this discussion, the rate considerations, it's about how CCWD, characterizes the EDU.
And it should be, I mean, at least in part, it's got gallons per day. Average
Mhm.
gallons per day is, or peak
Right, yeah.
has to be part of that equation. It can't just be how many sinks you have.
So the cut sheet in our standards and specifications should have a detailed breakdown of every type of water appurtenance, whether it be a hose bib or a sink or a toilet, and how that's all going to affect the system.
But it's really an insignificant amount of money in the big picture of things, unless you're the one paying. But my point is it defendable? Can we defend somebody comes in here and says, hey, why are you charging me the same as a household?
Mhm.
I've got 20 of these damn things.
Mhm.
I'm only getting one bill. I only have my meter read one time. And
Yeah,
I
but
just think that you could make the case that
But-
it's
I
not
think
fair.
there's no meter reading taking place. I think the administrative cost is
yeah,
tiny fraction
it's
of.
minimal.
It really wouldn't impact it. It's really, and the whole purpose of the equivalent dwelling unit structure is based on those engineering determinations of the type of use. That's the standard is designed to equate, whether it's a house or a commercial use, that standard unit of measurement of one equivalent dwelling unit. And that just multiplies as the use increases, but it doesn't change. It doesn't make sense necessarily to have a different one for different types of uses. The point is to define a fixed unit of measurement, for lack of a better term.
Do we have an option for the customer, instead of going EDUs, actually basing it on their water use? I mean, they all
We
have
have one-
water. with
I
the-
don't know.
So
We
the
used to have one customer.
only issue with the water use is then you might inadvertently be charging them for outdoor usage.
So there are
that's
other
problematic.
structures that exist, and we did look at that. I think there's multiple reasons why we think this is the better structure for us. You could do it based on water usage and type of, strength of the wastewater, depending on the type of use. And there's much more complicated rate structures on the wastewater side that evaluate all of that. When we looked at it, we don't have that. We're not confident enough in the water usage data across all of our sewer customers to begin with, because a lot of our sewer customers are not CCWD water customers. So it'll be harder for us to do that than a utility.
How could that possibly be?
We have sewer customers that are not CCWD water customers.
And what are we treating?
They like, for example, Vallecito. Their water customers are separate system, separate utility. The sewer customers are ours. So that, or they're on might be that they're on a well, or there's some other water source for those customers. But even within our own structure, we now have very accurate water consumption data for each of our customers, but that wasn't the case prior to the AMI project. And so we felt like it wasn't in the next, and, the next time we go through a rate study, we might want to consider a different structure for sewer. That takes all those variables into account, but we just didn't feel like we had the data to tackle that.
And you also need to know how much was treated at the wastewater plants collectively in aggregate. Because then if you're gonna do like, flow rates or variable rates, you need to know how much was treated at the plant. So then you then are able to connect the two to say, we're not charging more than the cost of service because the variable rates are related to how much we treated at the plant. So that's data we need as well. I'm working with South Placer Wastewater Agency, which is Roseville, Placer County, and SP Mud. And their EDU is 190 gallons per day, which is a reflection of a typical single-family home. And then they assign EDUs to commercial based on what's their equivalency to 190 per day. And then that's how commercial customers get assigned more EDUs. Or potentially even less, or a point of an EDU, like 1.5, right? Instead of just whole numbers.
Right,
So-
see, I've always, I mean, we don't get a lot of residential customers, but when I first started, that is how it went. It was based on your consumption.
Which is,
There was no sinks or any of that calculations. They did an estimation. They'd go out and look at 3 different businesses. They'd go out and figure out what their water usage was, and they'd say, okay, that's a multiple of, there's, 600 gallons per day, multiple, so you have 3 ifs, SUs or whatever. That's how they used to do it. I guess we do it differently now, but.
Bertha, this is another topic for the external relations.
The illicit affairs committee.
sounds like that committee's becoming the board.
Give us good direction.
Steering wheel.
Yeah, steering wheel.
Well, anyway, I don't like it, but move on. I'm not gonna.
I don't like it either.
But I want to
We'll
emphasize
come back
again,
to it. We all get to have time
Yeah.
to think about all this. We come back a little bit later.
I just want to reemphasize again, though, we are not changing in any way your EDU assignments that exist today. The only thing we're doing is if it's truly equivalent dwelling unit, then it should be the same unit rate because you're correlating what's commercial compared to what they would be equivalent to your residential. So then the unit rate should be the same.
That's only a $4 difference from what it used to be
Correct.
over 2 months.
Yeah. On that 735 EDUs, do you know how many, accounts that is? How many,
I do know
There's 735.
well, that's EDUs.
That's
but one
EDUs.
Building could have 10 EDUs. So that's what I'm
Right. I apologize, but my computer died while being up here, but I do have at my fingertips. I just have to plug my computer back in.
No worries.
Here, I
I'm
got it.
just kind of curious.
You can plug it in right here.
I would think it's probably just, I think it's even less than half.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm just trying to just how many people bear the brunt of that $4 per EDU.
Wasn't there 4,500 single family residence sewers and 700 and something?
735 non-residential.
That's
The
EDU,
question
so-
is how many customers is?
Yeah, how many accounts is?
How many establishments is it?
Right.
Are gonna,
I think we're around 5,000 total customers. So Habib said that's about half,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah, probably 300 and something accounts, commercial accounts representing 735 EDUs. So that is a way to give them a lower EDU raise that we show what's the cost of billing, sending out a bill, which is gonna be minimal. And
So no
that
one
could
has
be,
10 EDUs with that. So no one has 10
Somebody does.
EDUs. No one's paying for 10 EDUs. are they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah, there are.
Every restaurant that's connected to CCWD has 10 EDUs.
Oh, 10?
but as I mentioned, wastewater super quick compared to water. Water's a little more complicated. And then I already mentioned that. And then here is the survey to your other local agencies. It shows where you are today and then where you would be. So you'll be more towards the right side of that survey spectrum.
The right side,
The,
the
yeah,
high side.
the right side, yeah.
Saying.
But it's still like you're using 2024.
I'm using 2024, yes, and then
And
we
I would be looking at 2028, and I know these other people obviously, well, they may already have a rate increase.
maybe
Yeah,
that's what's problematic is sharing, like, then you have to put
Our
asterisks that
super-
this agency doesn't have rates out to 28. So then
Mm.
we're comparing your 28 to their 22,
Right.
right? So
I
then,
know, but I'm still looking at the end and my calculation showing 2028, a sewer bill. The standard sewer bill, like $365 by.
And 26 cents.
Sorry, you have to math it, okay, yeah, and then, for water, just for the base. I didn't use 240, anyhow, I just kind of like, what's the end result, because we're looking
Yeah,
at
we
this.
have
now.
right here. It's in the slides.
Yeah,
Yeah. So 2028 sewers, 365, 26.
Can I give some quick figures?
yes,
2024, water and sewer, 5/8 inch, 375.42. 2025, 433.42. 26, 497.30. 27, 570.65. 2028, $613.68.
That's for both sewer and water every 2
Yep.
months. So the monthly
That's what
is
I got.
half.
up in 2028. Yeah, it's a lot.
It is.
Who's got the keys to this place?
Ratepayers.
We need a bigger truck.
No, they really don't.
You need to throw them at the state.
Anyhow, it's a lot to add.
Okay, so upcoming,
So next up, we're doing the rate workshop today. I'm gonna be drafting the reports, so then it's gonna give you all the data analysis. Our reports are probably gonna be 70 pages long, maybe even 80, 90. All the detail analysis that goes to these rates that I showed you. Have that available towards the end of July, and then you'll be able to have your notes mailed out if you so choose to give that direction.
On that report that's extremely detailed,
Mhm.
is it gonna say, all the expenses for operating that you used and what they were for, kind of a thing?
Yes, as well as the inflationary adjustments that we're assuming for each different expense line. That's
I'd
correct.
like to see that. I'd like
Yes.
to print it out.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to. print it.
Okay, and when we talk about expenses, are we talking, our facilities? When we talk expenses, do we talk about, other departments?
We're talking about all your operating expenses
Mhm.
of your enterprises as well as your capital spending.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay, so that includes this building?
Yes,
Everything.
there's everything.
Well, you pretty much everything that we saw in the budget, we just approved for the most part.
Yeah.
right?
everything except the North Fork project.
And electrifying. Except those.
And then
Nothing to be worried about.
the road show is like in the middle of August.
14th, 15th, 16th. Okay, this is an action item, looking for a motion.
I'll move,
Wait,
for acceptance to start the two.
oh,
Okay, we got a motion to, by Director Davidson, by minute entry, directing staff to proceed with implementation of the recommended rate design and set up Prop 218 hearing for September 13th at 1 PM.
So I have a question though. Does that mean we can still make changes to it or we're approving as is? We can make changes down the road.
I would need to know what requests you want me to review because I'm gonna be starting to draft a report.
I can do anything
Public.
less than, right?
But you can't pick and choose like rates, but I want the tier one rate to be $1.50 and
Why?
because then it's not cost of service based, it's arbitrary. And then our report is meaningless because our report doesn't substantiate those rates.
So changes would have to be tied to the cost of service, and if it may
We
trigger
don't,
restarting the
It
process.
could be
What if you wanted to go to, just adopt the first 3 years?
Sure.
you can do that.
And if you want to reduce the rate, it just has to be reduced pro rata to all the rates, proportionally to all the rates. You can't
I'm
be
not-
picking,
I'm
you
not-
can't pick and
I'm not
choose.
Concerned about, I've just thrown it out there that maybe 5 years is too big of a bite,
That's right.
too far out in the future.
I
Well,
agree.
there's nothing stopping us from coming back in whenever the board wants and reevaluating and doing
But,
another rate
no.
study. I think I would recommend, we've done the work, I think adopting a 5-year rate plan makes sense. If in 3 years circumstances have changed. And
We don't have to implement it. When that year comes, we do not have to implement these new
We
rates.
could do a new rate study.
In year two, we don't have to implement year two. If we approve these, we
But
can,
if the information we got was good today, it should be good in 3 years, right? But the only thing is, in 3 years, we'll actually have a better idea of what our
Exactly.
economy and.
right.
Right, and so
I like
if
that.
those circumstances have changed and we
That's-
want to reevaluate
I
the
like
rates
it,
at that
yeah.
point.
We
then
make a
I
lot
think
of
we can do
assumptions
that.
that may not come true,
3 years.
including growth, including property tax,
Well,
including other revenue. I mean,
My recommendation would be adopt the 5-year rate plan, and if in 3 years we want to reevaluate, there's nothing stopping us from doing.
the
that.
answer to your question is yes, we can make changes in over the next 2 or 3 meetings. Yeah.
But,
If we can he can explain to us, they can explain to us what changes we can make and how we can make them. But yes, we can make
And
changes
the
past.
only other thing that could happen, if all the public that's here all the time, if they decide to go against it and we get 51%, we can't do it, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
Do we have any public?
no, I like the 3-year. I like the 3-year.
Well, I'm not
Before-
necessarily proposing that. I'm just saying, I know that's available to us.
Right.
We do have a motion on this item in front of us.
So a second.
Who made it?
Nobody
Director
seconded.
Davidson made a motion. We're looking for a second and we do have public comment before we vote.
You want to change it to a 3-year recommendation?
No, I don't think it's necessary to do that right now. I mean, it's,
Well, Michael made some sense with, because if we do a 3-year, then do we have to go through these processes again?
We would not be able to raise rates without doing this.
Correct.
Okay, so
If
if
we
we
approve-
5-year,
if we
and then
approve-
we don't up them, we don't have to do the 218.
If we approve all 5 years and then as the year got here, we didn't implement them. Is where, my recommendations, if we're gonna make any changes.
Well, I
That'd
just
be-
wish that.
We have more information, we'd be
Yeah,
smarter.
before. We've done that
It-
before.
I
Yeah.
just wish that the public would have been here today to hear more, and I know they will. So I really would like to hear, do we have one member of the public wants to say anything? And-
Yeah,
We should have a second
Uh,
motion, but
I'm looking for,
Just a second.
we're looking for a second and then we're gonna go to public comment.
And
I'm not doing it.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna go to public comment. Any,
I just want to say one more thing. So if you end up not implementing, say, year 3 or year 4 rates, those don't go away. Those still on the books that you can always implement them later. They just can't be implemented before that year, but if you don't implement them and you delay it, you still have them available because
Right.
you've already noticed them.
And I think that does make more sense doing the 5-year. I just really want to hear what the public has to say
Okay.
before I made it kind of a second or a vote.
before we vote, we'll go, thank you, Habib.
And if there's any
thank
questions
you.
from the members of the public, please let me know to come back up and I could.
Or just, I don't think we're not gonna, just stay here if you would.
Okay.
No, we're gonna have questions from the public. Who's up? Mr. Copeland, go ahead.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good afternoon, board. Nice to see you all. I came back from vacation with a souvenir called COVID. So anyway, I'd like to thank Habib and his group for putting together a fine presentation, all the work done by Michael and his crew, Jeff and his crew. Just going down my notes here really quick of today's meeting. Michael didn't get out a press release until yesterday. That should have been done by External Affairs a while ago. I'm also on board with Director Cicada. God bless Director Cicada and Director Underhill for continuing to have the individual customer at the forefront of their agendas. I recall months ago that Director Cicada did want this whole procedure to be up in front, out and going. And it kind of stumbled. Maybe Jessica leaving got things in array, but anyway. President Ratterman, you say that notices go out on Friday. That's enough time. It may be okay by the Brown Act, but something like this, you've got a weekend and then 3 days. To keep saying that, well, we put it out Friday is enough, I don't agree with that. I would still like to see for all to strive to get the participation, to get the word out. Unfortunately, Director Thomas has an apathy towards this, noting that after 6 years of membership and watching over 20 years, this is nothing unique. Well, darn it, have you done everything you could to stoke up the fires to get participation through notices, comments, appearances, and so forth? But I do appreciate Director Thomas's hard work in other areas of the CCWD. Grant funding, gosh, maybe put a committee together. I know we could get committeed out, but it seems like in the last few years of this budget, 27 and 28, there's a lot of grant assumption. And gosh, let's keep this at the forefront. Let's keep the board advised. Michael, you're doing a great job. I know that I hate to add this to your things to do list, but maybe a committee for the grant funding. I think that would be excellent. Kicking the can down the road. Director Cicada mentioned this a couple meetings ago. There are a couple board directors that the can has turned into a 55-gallon can. You've been here around long enough to realize that we got to do a lot more than just put increases on the back of your regular existing consumers. And finally, again, thank you, Director Underhill, for making those tallies of those monies. My gosh, over $600 in 5 years. We're paying, that's double of what we're paying. And some directors were arguing about pennies and cents for their commercial friends on the wastewater side. So let's take care of the end use customer. And we look forward to your rate studies. I have been getting the word out. I've been trying to keep it fair. I see John's stuff coming out, and I try to write his coattail as far as getting the right information out. I will be putting out numbers.
Hey, Ralph, please wrap it up. You got 3 minutes and you're getting into your 5th minute now.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And that's all I've got to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else online? Jessica.
Good afternoon. Jessica Self, General Manager at Union Public Utility District. I just wanted, just quickly, can we go back to slide 17, the agency comparison chart? I did some quick math, and then I had customer service staff double check. And also I reached out to City of Angels really quick. I think there may be a typo in here for UPUD and Angels Camp. So UPUD's rates, we just finished, we adopted a new rate structure January 1 of 2023. And our base rate is $56.63 per month with $18 a month Utica fee. And then for consumption, it's 94 cents per 100 cubic feet. So for a customer who consumed 2,300 cubic feet, that would amount to $192.50 for a bi-monthly rate with that consumption. And then City of Angels, just because we work so closely together in the JPA, I kind of knew their rate structure, and they are actually slightly more than us. So I looked at their structure, and then I reached out to the city administrator and confirmed it. Theirs should actually be $199.02 for their bi-monthly for 2,300 cubic feet.
What was
and then just to
UPUD's
also
again?
just to also put it into perspective as well for UPD, I want to be transparent, only making CCWD look better. Our rate structure is per calendar year. So on January 1st of 2024, our rates will increase. And that bi-monthly amount for 2,300 cubic feet will go up to $209.56.
And Jessica, what was your monthly for UPUD? I got it for Angels
Fine.
Camp,
So our monthly right now is.
or bi-monthly rather.
Bi-monthly right now would be for that consumption amount, 192.50.
Okay. I thought you said 119, but 192. Okay.
192. So
All right,
both of
well,
our, so if those were adjusted, it would actually be CCWD's rates in that first year would still be lower than most agencies.
And I'll look into that and make sure I got the right rates for that.
well, thank you.
Yep.
Anything further?
Nope, good luck. I know
I-
this is hard. Things
can
are
I-
expensive.
I have a question for you though. In year 5, what would your rate be?
Oh, man, let me do the math really quick. Well, let's see, it'll be.
Nope,
80
time's up. Sorry.
No.
I can mess it $83.68. So 83.68 plus 18. I can do it quick. I'll message it in there, but we are going up 11% every year.
And see, what is ours? 14, and then we're, like, the first year, it's pretty low compared to the other years. So I'd like to look at the end of 5 years, kind of as comparisons for myself.
Or with other agencies?
Yeah,
They may not have.
but
rates.
they just did theirs, so
Yes.
she will, and that's a great comparison in my opinion,
yeah.
because we're local.
Whoever you can get,
What is the
whoever you
standard-
could get.
What is the standard years of most rate structures? 3, 5, 4?
Oh, yeah, it varies quite a bit, actually.
There's gotta be something you're used to.
I would say probably, it's not a big majority, but I'd say most is 5 years, especially on the wastewater side. I mean, wastewater is almost all 5 years. There's not much, volatility there. And then, but have been working with agencies where they do 3 years, they do 4 years. That's pretty common. And then I only work with one agency where they do it every single year.
Ay.
Yeah.
By the time they have everything printed, it's time to change the rate.
Do they have an in-house staff that does?
Yeah, I'll tell you something. I bet they don't get challenged by the 218.
We're doing it
Yeah.
every year.
Director Sakita, to answer your question, at year 5 with consumption at 2,300 cubic feet, it would be $266.84 at year 5.
Or
And we would be at
Or
what?
five
What are the
months.
numbers?
280.
But by year 5, you mean year 5 of UPUD's rate
Yeah,
schedule, which.
Yeah.
What year is that?
That will be.
well, they just approved theirs.
First 2027.
Or I thought they just approved one in January, so I assumed it was a 5-year.
Yeah.
Yes.
They approved it this year.
Okay.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you, Jessica.
Bye.
Okay. Any public comment in the room?
There's somebody who's got.
Go.
This would be part of a question as well. If you go to page 16, your slide shows existing proposed bills, and the question I have, and it's really not making a judgment, but is the board and CCWD committed to issues of conservation? Or is it just really a matter of covering costs? I mean, this is not a criticism, it's just a question because.
For me, it's covering costs.
Okay. All right, that's fair. That's fair. And the only reason I mention that is because if you look at the impact in the first tier at 15 HCF, it's $28.93, almost $29. For 30, which is double that amount of use, it's only 16. So it's an incentive to use more water, quite frankly. I don't see anything wrong with that, especially when you're trying to reserve a certain amount of water for your own, for use within the county. But
Yeah, we're trying to preserve our water rights.
Well, we're not,
well, no, I mean, that's a fair,
the tiers are not tied to incentivizing use or non-use. The tiers have to be and are tied to the cost of service.
I understand that, but basically what's going on is you're giving a break to people who use more water, which is okay. Especially if you want to preserve water rights.
That is not part of the incentive behind that. We're not trying to push.
The point I tried to make earlier, Bob, was that the lowest tier is basically where the state wants people to be using water, and one day they'll mandate that. I mean, they'll force us to do that, and then that whole tier thing will just be out the window. I mean, they want people to use 55 gallons per person per day. At that lowest tier rate, that's pretty darn close. So what the state is asking the rest of the state.
No, I understand that part. I'm just, it's kind of an interesting thing that, if we're looking at conserving water, which I think is what you're saying the state wants to do. We're not doing it with the, with proposed tiers. And that, as I've said, as they say, there's nothing wrong with that if you're trying to preserve water rights, because, we really have issues in this county about water rights. We don't have any. And we need to get as many as we can. So
Yeah, that's not what's behind it. I don't see how that's in.
I don't think it's deliberate. I don't think that's the incentive. I just, making this observation that, that's, basically what's going on.
No,
But I don't think we're incentivizing additional use in the second tier.
I don't think it's deliberate. I don't think it's deliberate. I just think it's just the way the numbers work out. But it is what it is.
Just a coincidence.
I don't know about that. Anyhow.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Glad I'm down here, Bob.
Especially for the next couple of months. Okay, we got a motion and a second. All public comment has been heard. Becca, you take roll?
Do we have to close a public hearing?
There is no public hearing.
This is
I thought it was.
now, what we're voting on is
That's
the
September.
implementation,
yeah,
right?
yes.
Okay, Director Underhill,
Yes.
Director Davidson,
Yes.
Director Thomas,
Yes.
Director Cicada,
And I'm saying yes, however, it's just because we're voting to move forward. And that will start the public outreach that we have set up. We have the public hearing, and any public out there listening, please show up and let us know how you feel, or if you don't want us to do it. And you know what you have to do if you want that to happen.
Right. Did you say public outreach?
Something, I don't know what I said. Public, I want you to get down here.
That was gonna be.
That's a long,
To not do it and get your 51% and then see where we land.
that's a long.
Yeah, we got a yes.
President Ratterman.
Yes,
And watch that.
just yes, just yes. All right, moving on.
To know.
5A
Public outrage.
on our agenda. Damon Wyckoff, Director of Operations. Let's
Good afternoon, Director.
Let you know, I pretty much looked through that during.
In consideration of everything that's gone on today, I'm happy to take questions by exception about last month's work efforts for the field. However, I also do have a PowerPoint that I could provide to you all. It's the board's pleasure. Really, I mean, highlights are, we did take the Redwood B tank offline in Copperopolis, so we had a bid walk mid-month. So we are in the midst of,
Is the Redwood available?
no, it will actually be, as with previous projects, the cost will be identified by the contractor, and they will note how much that Redwood's worth, and it will be taken out of there.
I just had to ask, the
Profit.
people are gonna be calling in asking about it.
I've already, I've tried.
Yeah.
30 leaks repaired in Rancho Calaveras. The distribution crew does a fabulous job. And we still have a utility crew that's out there replacing service lines.
That's only on one street.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Vallecito grit tank continues. We received the electrical panels from our sub who constructed them. Now our electricians will wire them up. Put on, you've seen in the ops report depictions of pad support around electrical conduit, all manner of repairs. It's your,
Yeah.
okay. All right, here we go.
We don't need that.
Jessica, he
I'll be-
didn't want to
I'll
do
be-
You
that.
think I was looking at during all the financial stuff?
Be quick.
Sorry.
We do have some good pictures, so I think, I think our field guys do a phenomenal job illustrating, what they do in pictures now. So everybody's really good about sending me pictures. We talked about this one, last month. This is a Booth Court. We had a PRV that failed that resulted in, this line, which is called a Bluebell line, 2-inch line failing. And the image on the right and the image on the left. So what you're seeing is a 6-inch reduction to a 2-inch plastic line. And in between that plastic and the 6-inch is a valve. And that's a 2-inch valve with a little stub of metal pipe. And the image on the right is the tuberculation inside that metal pipe. So that's the corrosion of that metal pipe that we were able to eliminate as part of the Booth Court 2-inch water line replacement. So that line blew up. The image on the left is a result of an overpressurization. The image on the right is the backfill compaction of the base rock, which will now be paved. The Jenny Lynn distribution crew hard at work. So this is an abandonment of a service line and then a new install on Hedgepeth. So it's kind of two different operations going on here where we hydro excavate the existing service, cut it, shut it off at the water main, and then reestablish a connection to a new service line, run the new service line through a different alignment to the property. So various images, you have the vacuum truck and the image on the right and the trench. And then a kind of a far away image, you see the cypress trees to orient yourself in the image on the left. Phenomenal work. Just another, we've shown pictures like this in the past. The image on the left is kind of the distance shot, and you have close is on the right, showing you where that water meter is sitting behind the cypress tree and on the customer's property, and just some of what our staff have to deal with in terms of placement of water mains and water service laterals. More pictures, final product on the right with temporary paving installed.
That's a new paving machine that worked with?
I have a picture of that. No, it's not in action yet, but it's here. So here's service line replacement. So once again, disconnect at the water main midway of the street in the image on the left, and then reconnect the new service and run temporary asphalt patch. Here's the B tank and copper. So image right and left, kind of trying to show you in a way both sides of the redwood tank, which you see first when you walk up to the B tank site, and then the steel tank is behind it. And then the little building on the right pushes water from the two tanks to our C tank, which is a couple miles away. What's important about this is the ponding of water in the image on the right at the base of the redwood tank, and then the trough in the image on the left that's wet and full of water. So this is a leaking tank, and this tank, if there's a leak on the side of the tank, we can repair that. And what you do is you actually cut a slit in the redwood, and you can put redwood dowels in. So to kind of stiffen the tank, you can tighten the straps around the tank. But fortunately, with what goes on with B tank here is we're leaking at the inlet and outlet piping in the floor of the tank. So the water perks out around the outside and creates this moat, if you will, around the tank. And so during the heat wave on 4th of July, we had staff constructing moats because the water it was leaking more than it had in the past. And so the determination was made coming into the week post 4th of July that let's take time to take the tank offline. The project to replace the tank and rehab the redwood on site or the steel tank on site is almost at the end of its bid period. So we anticipate proposals coming in, and then we're going to move heartily into construction. Moving on here, just to kind of give you an idea of the complicated valving that exists on sites. Oftentimes you pull out the as-built, you pull out the maps, and then you operate the different valves, and then you mark those valve lids, normally open or closed, or this valve is, you're going to put a red dot on this one, and this signifies X to that distribution crew. Up on the Ebbets Pass, now we're moving into distribution systems repairs. This is a gasket on a flanged meter. that failed in a box. So this is basically a wooden vault. So we have quite a few of these. And as the district has funds and opportunity, we replace these wooden vaults.
Damon, getting back to the redwood tank, those bands, are they ferrous metal? Or are they brass or copper or
Those bands are like galvanized steel. Yeah. They're-
galvanized? Okay.
Yeah. Incidentally, I was involved in a project that lined a redwood tank. And once so there's a liner inside the tank and all the redwood dried up. And it was like tightening up, it was like tighten up your belt. Like you could tighten those bands up till they couldn't tighten anymore. And the redwood planks were still a little bit loose because they were so old, because the inside liner was actually acting as the tank. And we pulled, after we ended up replacing the tank with the liner, we pulled 5-gallon buckets of acorns that were placed between the redwood and the liner by the woodpeckers over the years. So when I see a redwood tank go away, it makes me feel good.
Crying.
I mean, the wood is beautiful, don't get me wrong. But for a water supply, it's an issue. 1-inch poly repair, just an illustration of how precise our guys work to locate the actual source of the leak, and the curb stop and wherever they're going to crimp and the meter set. And then, so the end product is that they have as few holes in the road as possible and they're going to patch and final pave. Here's a 1-inch copper line that was, there's a conduit installation project that PG&E is working on. Unfortunately, we have a copper service line of a Mustang on the pass that was hit by the project. And so it kind of shows you, these pictures illustrate the interaction between other utilities and our staff in order to resolve an issue. This is kind of some wide shot, close-up shot of the repaired 1-inch copper service now with poly on the right. And then the wide shot of the PG&E crew working to install electrical conduit, part of the undergrounding effort that's taking place up on the pass, system hardening for PG&E. Here's an image of a T on the left, some corroded material, and then a sleeved section of pipe that was damaged in another conduit installation effort on the image on the right. And then our staff working through to repair where the sleeved pipe was, and images of the trenching and the conduit installation project on the right.
Excuse me, where is Red Tail Hawk Road?
Kelly, can you tell us where Red Tail is?
Is that subdivision across from our big park?
Oh.
Is it a taco truck?
Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
There's not a lot there yet, so.
Is that not Cedar?
Okay,
Heights?
thank you.
Cedar Heights, Cedar Ridge. And then, so these are some great pictures of the recirculating gravel filters at the West Point wastewater treatment facility. And so these take the secondary effluent or the sewage, liquid sewage, if you will, and then they push it through those filter beds through piping that has perforations in it, and it pushes the water through the gravel filter, and the gravel then it percolates into the ground from there, and then catches in a catch basin, recirculates. And so sometimes those pipes leak. The image on the left shows you the water shooting up into the sky, so that's the leaks. And then the holes in the filter bed on the right are of staff digging out those leaks and making repairs to them. And then one of the work efforts is you take the caps off of these pipes, and then you push all of the collected sediment that is built up over the years out, and you get these, it's kind of like those little firecrackers that you light on the 4th of July that make the little snakes on the ground. On the right there, that's the sediment from the sewage treatment facility coming out in a nice dark and loamy way. And so the image on the left is just those caps as they're kind of terminated at the end of the filter bed, and making repairs to those and pushing water through them to clean them out. So we have Doug and Scott Grutzmacher treatment and distribution work really closely together up in West Point. They do a great job to keep the facility operating effectively. Some of the FEMA related work that we're in the midst of, we just completed a damage assessment last month of some of the damage that we experienced as a result of the March atmospheric river storms. And one of the unfortunate locations that received a lot of debris inundation was Bear Creek.
Bear
Once again, you guys remember, we FEMA funded the rehab of this site in 2019, and they're going to fund it again. And so what we need to look for now is a way to mitigate future issues. This is a pretty complicated site though, because it's a creek in the middle of a watershed. So when you have stormwater inundation, it really becomes difficult where you put all that sediment, where you put all that debris. So the image here on the left is the diversion at Bear Creek, and just depicts the spillway of a small dam there. And then the close-up on the right of some more trees and logs that are collected on top of that. And in 2019, we excavated the better part of a little over 3 feet down in front of that dam area. In the image on the right here, you can see it's about 4 to 5 inches from the top of that dam. So that's how much sediment pushed in the storms in March. So we went out there with FEMA, and they are characterizing the project now, which is called a DDE, damage dimensions and assessment. And so that gets submitted to our project manager for FEMA, and then they push that up, and then we receive notification of funding here within the next couple months. We installed a valve on the oxidation ditch at the Arnold Waste Treatment Plant. So the image on the left is a subcontractor doing a core cut for us, so we could then put a flange in on the right and then construct a valve. So this will allow us during atmospheric river storms, when we're inundated with stormwater and inflow and infiltration, to better manage the flows that we have coming into the oxidation ditch in Arnold. So this is a really good improvement to the treatment facility. These are nice projects. They don't take a lot of time, they don't cost a lot of money, and they provide a great benefit.
Would it be beneficial for the district to own that core drill?
That's a good question. So I've been here almost 5 years. We've had to core drill 3 times. But when you need to, you need to. I'm not sure how much they cost, but that effort right there is about $500. So I'd say probably not there yet.
The core bit would be about 700.
Yeah, right. And so here's the pumps on their pump race getting prepped to be installed into the vault of the Vallecito grit chamber. And then we repurposed some grading from a waste treatment facility to use inside the chamber, so that when you open up the grit chamber basin, where all the sewage slows down and all the eggshells and debris are allowed to settle to the bottom, you can actually stand in there and you can't accidentally fall in. You're protected from falling in. So just an illustration of how we repurpose material out in the field. New PRD delivery. This PRD is going to go to the Dorrington pump station up in Evans Pass. It's always nice to see these coming in, because up on the pass we have over 100 plus pressure reducing stations. So this is great to see this happening. Electrical pads poured, like I talked about earlier, for the grit chamber and the trash rack in Vallecito. That's all in-house. Our guys do great work. Repairing conduit at the Connor Estates lift station on the left. And then the image on the right, repairing another section of Bluebell piping in Copperopolis on Pueblo Trail. So this is the distribution and construction crews working together to make repairs. Clay valve repairs from our mechanical staff. So this is at Big Tree's 2 tank. We had a ball valve split, and it negatively affects the clay valve's ability to operate effectively when it can't accurately move the water where it needs to move it. So we were able to replace that ball valve, restore operations there. Here's our mechanical crew using a crane truck to set a new pump and pump head at the Forest Meadows Waste Treatment Facility. Here is the pictures of the erection of the new Larkspur tank. So this was an old actual welded steel tank that was past its useful life that is being replaced. And it's kind of an interesting picture because it shows you that the framework of the roof is constructed first, and then the first run of paneling is installed, and then there's a jack system inside the tank. So as that run is installed, they jack the whole tank up one level, then the next run on the ground, and slowly jack it up until the tank is at height. And then they put the final run of metal paneling in. And then that image there on the right, you can see the temporary tanks that we use to keep everybody in service while the new tanks.
Where's Larkspur?
Larkspur is in Forest Meadows.
Oh.
And then finally, an image of the paver being taken out of its wooden crate on delivery.
Oh, that's nice.
MG7 Super.
Nice.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
You know, I'd like to just say something. Every once in a while, you know, we read all the time about new employees and everything, but you know, if somebody's around when we're having a board meeting, you know, just to pop in and say, this is, you know, Eric Martinez, for example, that, I think that would be nice to just meet our new employees every once in a while. As I say, don't take them away from their job, of course, but if they're around, hey, we'd be glad to meet them. Right, board?
Sure.
Got it. Absolutely. Noted.
All right, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Damon?
Yeah.
I told former Director Dean that he might be able to get a tour of the warehouse if he came today. So could you have Kevin? or
Yeah,
somebody come,
absolutely.
or maybe you could show him around?
Yep, no problem.
You have time, Bob?
All right, thank you, Damon.
Thanks.
General Manager report, Michael.
All right, I'm gonna be mostly pretty quick. We were spending a lot of time meeting with developers lately. We have multiple development projects that are moving forward that we're excited about and trying to make sure we're doing everything we can to facilitate those. I will be in Roseville at JPIA's offices tomorrow and Friday. And but we'll be available working remotely, but finishing up the training that I've been in up there. We have a CPPA meeting next week here and probably learn more about future rate increases. So stand by for that. We're also going to participate in the next board meeting at Wallace Community Services District, where we inherited the water and wastewater system from down there, providing them with an update on the assessment district expenditures and infrastructure plans for the Wallace community. So we're looking forward to that.
When is that?
Wednesday the 19th, 7 o'clock.
Yep.
Evening meeting. Yeah, so if any board members would like to
Or
join,
you might want, give me a heads up on that.
absolutely, we'll do.
Did the second phase of that subdivision ever get approved?
Wallace Estates?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No, there's another little development down there, but not the one you're thinking.
Okay.
I'm gonna, I think a couple of directors might be able to speak more about the wildfire preparedness workshop yesterday, because I only was able to attend the very last part of it. So, but I do want to talk a little bit about the very last part of it that I was able to go to. So there's a lot of really good discussion about coordination among water agencies and maintaining that effort. And really have to give a lot of credit to Joel and Jessica for the work that they did in pulling that event together and bringing Kevin, Phillips from JPIA. You know, I heard nothing but rave reviews about the first part that I wasn't able to attend, and the part I was there for was great. And also just the opportunity to, you know, there were multiple staff and directors from the Highway 4 agencies that we were still talking at 6 o'clock last night. So it was just really great to connect with that whole group of people and talk about, you know, ongoing efforts to support each other and coordinate among those agencies. So really, really appreciate the work that Jessica and Joel did in putting that program together. And look forward to continuing those discussions. Lastly, I just, yeah. I don't know. I gotta give a ton of credit to staff for the amount of work that's gone into the rate study. And Habib, you've been fantastic. I don't know how many times Jeff and I have called Habib and his crew and said, we need to meet tomorrow. We have another idea. If there's any way to, drive this down, we're gonna find it. And I'm gonna get emotional here because the point I want to make is just that there's no one of us that is concerned about the end customer. It's every single one of us. And so I just appreciate the board's courage in moving forward on this. So thank you.
But thank you, Michael. We're doing board reports, information, future agenda items. Bertha, are you ready?
What happened to Cindy?
I'll go.
No,
Okay.
I don't really have any- that I'm not gonna be.
Too late. Go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to report other than I will not be at the next meeting physically. I'll be out of town. I will call in and listen. I may not participate, but I'll listen. And Bertha, you're gonna do the finance meeting if we have one in my
Yeah.
replacement, right?
Okay,
And we'll talk about the IRW. I still haven't gotten a return call from her.
We'll be taking
So-
them in. Go, I'm sorry. go ahead.
And I should be back in town August 4th, so I should be here in all the August meetings.
And when is the next finance committee meeting? Is that next week?
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, okay. And you'll be in
The eighth-
attendance?
the 18th?
Yes, 1 PM, the 18th, you'll be in attendance?
And,
Yeah.
and I will call into these. I just can't participate, but it helps me to stay on top of, what was discussed.
Okay, Bertha, you ready yet?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm ready. I'm always ready. Okay, I just want to add my comments about the wildfire education workshop, and it was just great to just see all of the other water agencies in Calaveras County. It was just, we hadn't seen each other in so long, and I think because personal relationships are so important, and I think the field will agree that, we just have to do that, and however much we can continue that is great. I'm gonna start my rotation of the different board meetings from the different agencies here, because I did that a couple of years ago, and I thought that was very, very helpful to me as a learning experience, because there's a lot of people out there. Native Sons was full, and it was just great. So let me see, nothing else up the hill. And we had talked about, we're going to be, Michael, you're going to be providing us information on grants that you're going to be seeking, or you're giving us a report, or whatever are you doing?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to.
Okay, because that's very, in lieu of raising rates, we have to go for grants. And that's all I have.
No, and that's one thing that I wanted we spoke briefly about it yesterday, this morning, whenever that was, about grants. Can we do that in one of the next two meetings?
Sure.
Just where we're at. It's gonna be a short topic, just which ones we've applied for, where we're at with whatever grants.
We'd be happy to. Absolutely.
And then I'm also gonna be traveling at our next meeting, but I'm traveling on CCWD business, so I will be able to call in and still run the meeting from Aqua JPI's office in Roseville.
Okay.
That's all I got. Posting. It's an exception under the new Brown Act rule for traveling on district business.
Are you gonna take your gavel with you or what?
No,
No?
well, I will still be able to run the meeting from there remotely.
Oh. Good to see that.
Jeff?
I have nothing to report.
Russ?
This is a kind of a painful thing to talk about, but at that fire education workshop yesterday afternoon. It always surprises me that you get together and it's a very meaningful exercise to have everybody in a room and we all sing Kumbaya and everything. But then when I asked Damon to bring up this issue about how are we going to participate in solving these fire emergencies, CCWD crews, but with our electric vehicle. And Bruce, that was the guy's name that was facilitating the meeting? Kevin, okay. And the moment that you said that, he just kind of had this big grin on his face and laughed, and everybody in the room laughed. And it's not a laughing matter to me. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're facing about the necessity to spend, and everybody agrees that it's stupid for the mountain counties utilities to be faced with that ridiculous responsibility. It shakes my confidence in the brain power of Sacramento that, come on.
I agree.
Come on, man.
One of the things I think that we can build upon that from the lack of success that the Aqua Working Group had related to the California Air Resources Board and their decision about the fact of whether or not water and wastewater purveyors or first responders is that now it's kind of bolstered the conversation with mountain counties and Justin. And I think Michael and Justin working with the working group through Aqua, we can start to get some traction because the point you made, I think, was a very clear one yesterday with the group at the Native Sons Hall of Murphys. But we all get it. And now we need our friends in the mountain counties to help kind of push this conversation forward because it's going to be it's going to happen. I mean, let's just say there's going to be a fire truck waiting for us to show up, whether it be a wildfire or a snowmageddon or an ice skating rink of water. And we can't get there because we're on the side of the road trying to charge an electric vehicle to get there because we're not a first responder. And they're going to be idling. They're going to be trying to help us up the hill. And it's going to be a comedy of errors potentially unless we kind of turn this thing around.
There's no comedy involved. That's what I'd like to kind of break through that the mindset that this is all going to go away. It's really very bothersome to me. I don't know.
There might be an off ramp.
Might be an off ramp. No, we'll have Habib come back after 2027 and we'll double rates again. So, to fund our $1 million VACON trucks and that stuff. And you'd have to buy 4 of them to do the work of 2. I don't know. I hope that I'm not just moving my lips and making noise here. Somebody's got to hear us.
Aren't we talking about buying what we need now? Because that'll hold us over for 18 years before they have to be electric. So if we do that, I would hope that in 18 years, they got it dialed in, that we can finally buy one in 18 years that works and does what's needed to be done. Or nope, they extended the whole thing.
Isn't it 2027 that we got to start?
Yeah, but you buy a vehicle now,
We should agenda
you
it.
don't have to
Yeah,
we don't need to. I'm sorry, I asked a question.
We can get another back maybe like a couple weeks.
No.
I don't think that's the point they were trying to make, Dan.
Russ, anything further to report?
Yes.
Director Thomas, are you done reporting?
Maybe. Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, next board meeting, Wednesday, July 26th, here 1 PM, and then Wednesday, August 9th here. We're going into,
You didn't say anything about your trip out of the country. So.
I have nothing to report,
Okay.
business wise anyway.
And no need for closed session today.
Oh, closed session has been canceled,
Do I
so
talk to you guys?
we're adjourned. Thank you.